Imagine waking up in a world where the streets are already alive with noise, where the scent of fresh bread mixes with smoke from early morning fires, and where every step you take echoes through stone roads built thousands of years ago. Welcome to the world of ancient Rome. But here's the real question. What would your life look like if you were born here? Would you be rich, poor, a slave, a soldier, or someone trying to climb the social ladder? Stay with me, because in the next hours, you're not just watching history. You are living it. And by the end, you might start comparing your daily life with theirs in ways you never expected. Now let's begin your day in Rome. Not as an outsider, but as a Roman citizen. Your eyes open inside a small, cramped apartment called an insula, shared with multiple families. The air feels tight, the walls are thin, and privacy? Almost non-existent. But this is normal life for the majority. While the wealthy few live in spacious houses with marble floors and gardens, most Romans wake up in modest conditions like this. And before you even fully wake up, your day is already dictated by survival, work, and responsibility. There's no luxury of scrolling through a phone or deciding later what to do. Your life has structure, routine, and pressure from the very first moment. As you step outside, the city greets you with chaos and energy. Vendors shouting, animals moving through narrow streets, citizens discussing politics, and children running errands, and yes, even the streets themselves tell a story. Many Roman roads were designed with durability in mind, some of which still exist today in fragments, showing just how advanced their engineering truly was. But here's something interesting. Despite all this advancement, sanitation was not what you might expect. Waste systems existed, but living conditions often meant dealing with dirt, overcrowding, and strong odors. Yet people adapted, because this was their normal. Now imagine heading to your morning tasks. Depending on your class, you might be working in a shop, helping a master craftsman, farming outside the city, or serving in a household. If you were wealthy, your day might begin with servants bringing food and organizing your schedule. But for the majority, work was not optional. It was survival. And speaking of survival, food played a central role in Roman life. Bread was a staple, along with olives, cheese, vegetables, and occasionally meat for those who could afford it. The wealthy enjoyed elaborate meals with multiple courses, exotic ingredients, and fine wines, while the poor relied on simple, filling meals. But no matter your status, eating was more than nourishment. It was a social activity, a moment to connect, negotiate, and even display status. And as the day continues, you might find yourself stepping into public spaces like forums, which were the heart of political, economic, and social life. Here, people gathered to debate, trade, and listen to speeches. Politics was not just something distant, it was present in everyday conversations. Emperors, senators, and leaders influenced decisions that affected millions. And while power seemed concentrated at the top, the voices of citizens still played a role in shaping the atmosphere of the empire. But life in Rome wasn't only about work and politics. Entertainment was a huge part of daily life, and nothing captured attention more than gladiator games. Massive arenas filled with roaring crowds watching fierce battles between trained fighters. These events were thrilling, brutal, and deeply embedded in Roman culture. People from all social classes attended, from common citizens to elite figures. And while it may seem shocking today, these spectacles were considered normal and even celebrated. But behind the excitement, there was a deeper layer of meaning. Gladiator games were not just entertainment. They were a display of power, control, and social order. And as the sun begins to set over the city, life doesn't slow down immediately. Markets close, workers return home, families gather, and conversations continue under the fading light. Yet even in these quiet moments, the structure of Roman society remains visible. Class divisions, roles, and expectations shape how people interact, what opportunities they have, and how they envision their future. And as you reflect on everything you've experienced so far, from crowded apartments to political discussions, from simple meals to grand spectacles, one thing becomes clear. Life in ancient Rome was complex, intense, and deeply interconnected, and this is just the beginning. Because beneath the surface of daily routines lies even more stories of ambition, struggle, innovation, conflict, and survival that shaped one of the greatest civilizations in human history. And now, as we move forward, ask yourself this. If you truly lived in this world, where would you stand, and how would you adapt to survive and thrive in a society that never stops moving? Now let's go deeper into something that truly defined Roman life beyond the surface of social structure. Because in ancient Rome, who you were born as often mattered more than what you could become, and this is where things start to feel very different from modern life. Society was divided into clear classes, with the elite patricians at the top, followed by the plebeians, and then slaves at the bottom, and each group had very different rights, lifestyles, and opportunities. Imagine waking up knowing that your entire future is already influenced by your birth status. If you were born into a wealthy patrician family, your life would be filled with education, influence, and access to power. You would be trained in rhetoric, politics, and leadership from a young age, preparing you to take roles in government or business. But if you were a plebeian, your life would likely revolve around work, trade, or manual labor, constantly striving to earn enough to support your family. And if you were a slave, your life would be even more restricted, as slaves were considered property rather than individuals, working in households, farms, mines, or public projects, with limited freedom and rights. Yet even within this strict system, there were moments where people could improve their situation, especially through trade, military service, or gaining favor with influential figures. This creates an interesting reality where ambition still existed, but the path to success was narrow and often unpredictable. Now think about education in Rome. Because it was not equally accessible to everyone, wealthy families hired private tutors or sent their children to formal schools where they learned reading, writing, mathematics, and especially rhetoric, the art of speaking and persuasion, which was highly valued in Roman society. Being able to speak well could determine your success in politics, law, or business. Meanwhile, children from poorer families often received limited education, focusing instead on practical skills needed for survival. This difference in education further reinforced the gap between classes, making upward mobility challenging but not impossible. And while we're talking about skills, let's not forget the Roman military, which played a massive role in shaping both the empire and individual lives. Soldiers were highly disciplined, trained, and organized, forming one of the most powerful armies in history. Serving in the military could be a path to stability, honor, and sometimes even citizenship for those who were not originally citizens. Imagine dedicating years of your life to training, marching across vast territories, building roads, and defending the empire's borders. The discipline required was intense, but the rewards could be life-changing. And speaking of roads and infrastructure, one of the most impressive aspects of Roman life was how connected the empire was. Roads stretched across vast distances, enabling trade, communication, and movement of armies. Cities were linked in a way that allowed Rome to maintain control over such a massive territory. This connectivity meant that goods, ideas, and culture could spread efficiently, making Rome not just a political power, but also a cultural hub. But life wasn't all structured and controlled. There was also entertainment, festivals, and moments of celebration that brought people together. Public baths, for example, were not just for hygiene, but also for socializing, relaxation, and networking. People would gather, talk, exercise, and unwind, making baths an essential part of daily life. And festivals throughout the year added excitement, with music, performances, food, and public events that gave citizens a break from routine. These moments of joy helped balance the demands of work and responsibility, reminding people that life was not only about survival, but also about community and enjoyment. As you continue to picture yourself living in this world, you might start noticing something important. Despite the differences between classes, Romans shared common experiences, working, eating, interacting, and participating in society. And that shared rhythm of life is what made Rome function as a civilization. People depended on each other, whether through trade, labor, military service, or social interaction. And this interdependence created a system where every role, no matter how small it seemed, contributed to the larger structure of the empire. But even with all this organization, Roman life was not without challenges. Economic pressures, political tensions, class conflicts, and external threats constantly shaped the stability of the empire. And as we move further into this journey, you'll begin to see how these challenges affected not just the empire as a whole, but also the daily lives of individuals trying to navigate their way through an ever-changing world. Now imagine stepping away from the busy streets and entering the political heartbeat of the empire. Because in ancient Rome, politics wasn't just for leaders. It influenced everyone's daily life. Whether you were aware of it or not, decisions made in the Senate, the rise and fall of emperors, the laws passed, the taxes imposed, all of these directly shaped how people lived, worked, and survived. And here's something fascinating. Rome's political system evolved over time, from a republic to an empire, meaning power gradually shifted from elected officials to centralized authority under emperors. This transition didn't happen overnight. It was the result of conflict, ambition, and struggle for control. Imagine living in a time where leadership could change the direction of your entire life. One emperor might bring stability, while another might create uncertainty. And as a citizen, your role was often limited, but not meaningless. Public opinion, support from the masses, and loyalty all played subtle but important roles in maintaining power. Now let's make this more personal. Picture yourself walking into a forum, the central hub of Roman public life. Around you, people are negotiating deals, debating ideas, listening to speeches, and sharing news. This space acts like a combination of a marketplace, a courtroom, and a social gathering place all in one. And while it may seem chaotic, there's an underlying order that keeps everything functioning. You might overhear conversations about trade, law, military campaigns, or even gossip about political figures. And in a society like this, information travels fast through word of mouth, making communication a powerful tool. But not everyone had equal influence. Wealthy individuals and politicians often had louder voices, while common citizens had to rely on gatherings, alliances, or public support to be heard. Still, the Roman system allowed for a level of participation that many other ancient civilizations did not provide. Now let's shift to something that affected nearly every Roman regardless of class economy. Trade was the lifeline of the empire, connecting distant regions through a network of roads and sea routes. Goods like grain, wine, olive oil, metals, and textiles moved across the empire, ensuring that cities remained supplied. Merchants played a crucial role in this system, often traveling long distances to buy and sell goods. And because Rome controlled vast territories, it had access to resources from different climates and regions, giving it a significant economic advantage. But with opportunity came challenges. Maintaining supply chains, protecting trade routes, and managing resources required careful coordination. Any disruption could impact food availability, prices, and overall stability. And speaking of food, let's revisit daily meals, because what people ate revealed a lot about their social status. The wealthy enjoyed multi-course meals with exotic ingredients like imported spices, rare meats, and fine wines, often served in elaborate settings. Meanwhile, the majority of citizens consumed simpler diets consisting of bread, porridge, vegetables, and occasional fish or meat. Meals were not just about sustenance. They were also a reflection of identity and class. And dining itself was often a social activity, where conversations flowed as freely as the wine. Now imagine yourself ending a long day, sitting among others, sharing stories, discussing events, or simply enjoying a moment of rest. In these moments, life in Rome feels almost relatable. Despite the differences in time, the human need for connection, comfort, and belonging remains the same, but beneath these everyday experiences lies a deeper reality. Rome was constantly balancing growth and pressure. Expansion brought wealth and influence, but also complexity and risk. Managing a vast empire meant dealing with cultural diversity, communication challenges, and administrative demands. And yet, the system persisted for centuries, adapting and evolving through leadership, innovation, and structure. As you continue to observe life in this world, you begin to realize that Rome was not just a city or an empire. It was a living system made up of millions of individuals, each contributing in their own way. From the smallest worker to the most powerful emperor, every role had a place. And understanding this interconnectedness is key to truly appreciating how Roman life functioned on a daily basis. And as we move forward, the story becomes even more intense. Because now we step into aspects of Roman life that are not just about routine, but about survival, ambition, risk, and the hidden struggles that many people face behind the scenes. Now let's step into a side of Roman life that many people often overlook: the world of work, survival, and ambition inside ancient Rome. Because while some lived in comfort, the majority of people were constantly working to sustain their lives. And this is where daily reality becomes very intense. Imagine waking up not just to start your day, but to secure your income, your food, and your future all at once for many Romans. The day revolved around labor, whether as a craftsman shaping tools, a merchant selling goods in the marketplace, a farmer cultivating land outside the city, or a laborer carrying heavy loads through busy streets. Each job required effort, skill, and consistency, and missing a day of work could directly affect survival. Now picture a small workshop filled with the sound of hammering, carving, or weaving. Artisans took pride in their craft, as their reputation often determined how much they could earn. Quality work could lead to more customers, better connections, and sometimes even upward mobility. And in a society where social class was important, being known for your skill was one of the few ways to stand out. But work wasn't always independent. Many people worked under masters or employers, following strict instructions and schedules. Discipline and reliability were highly valued traits because businesses depended on consistent output. Now let's shift your perspective again. Imagine you are a merchant navigating through a crowded market. You must negotiate prices, manage supply, and attract customers in a competitive environment. Your success depends not only on what you sell, but how well you communicate and build trust. This is where Roman society becomes fascinating, because commerce wasn't just economic, it was social. Relationships mattered, reputation mattered, and connections could influence opportunities. And while you're navigating this busy environment, you begin to notice something else: the presence of different languages, cultures, and backgrounds. Because Rome was not a single uniform population, it was an empire that included people from many regions, each bringing their own traditions, beliefs, and practices. This diversity made Rome dynamic, but also required adaptation and tolerance to maintain unity. Now let's talk about something that affected everyone regardless of occupation: housing. In crowded urban areas, many Romans lived in multi-story apartment buildings called insulae. These buildings were often packed with families living in small spaces, sometimes with limited access to water and basic facilities. Lower floors were usually more desirable and expensive, while upper floors were cheaper but less stable and harder to access. Despite these challenges, insulae allowed large populations to live within city limits, supporting the growing urban environment. In contrast, wealthy families lived in domus, private houses with multiple rooms, courtyards, and decorative elements that reflected their status. These homes were designed for comfort, privacy, and social gatherings, highlighting the clear differences in living conditions. And yet, whether rich or poor, everyone shared the same city, the same infrastructure, and the same environment. This coexistence created a unique dynamic where different lifestyles existed side by side. Now imagine the challenges of daily life: noise, crowds, limited resources, and constant movement. But also opportunities: trade, interaction, learning, and growth. Roman life was a balance between pressure and possibility. And as you continue to observe, you realize that adaptability was key. Those who could adjust to changing circumstances, build connections, and manage their responsibilities were more likely to thrive. And this mindset wasn't limited to the present, it shaped how Romans approached the future as well. Planning, discipline, and ambition were deeply embedded in the culture. Whether someone aimed to improve their economic status, gain political influence, or simply provide for their family, there was always a sense of direction guiding their actions. And as we go further into this journey, you'll begin to see how these everyday struggles and ambitions connect to larger forces: military expansion, political power, cultural influence, and the long-term stability of the empire. Because life in Rome wasn't just about individual survival. It was part of a much bigger system that depended on the contributions, efforts, and resilience of its people. Now let's move into one of the most fascinating and intense aspects of life in ancient Rome: entertainment, power, and how the empire kept its people engaged. Because Roman entertainment was not just about fun, it was deeply connected to politics, control, and social unity. Imagine walking toward a massive structure like the Colosseum, hearing the distant roar of thousands of people before you even arrive. The energy builds as you get closer. Vendors selling food, crowds gathering, voices overlapping in excitement. This wasn't just an event, it was an experience shared by the entire city. Inside, people from different classes sit in assigned sections, reflecting the social hierarchy of Roman society. The wealthy closer to the action, the common citizens further away, yet all sharing the same spectacle. And when the games begin, the atmosphere shifts completely. The crowd becomes fully focused, reacting to every move, Every clash, every moment of tension, gladiators enter not just as fighters, but as symbols of strength, skill, and survival. These individuals trained for years, mastering combat techniques, endurance, and discipline. Some were slaves, some were prisoners, and others chose the path of gladiators for the promise of fame, rewards, or freedom. But regardless of their background, each step into the arena carried risk and uncertainty. And as you watch, you begin to realize that these battles were not random chaos. They were structured performances with rules, strategies, and expectations. The crowd's reaction mattered. Victory brought honor, while defeat could mean the end. And yet, for many Romans, this was a normal form of entertainment, something that brought excitement and distraction from daily struggles. But gladiator games were only one part of Roman entertainment. Chariot races were another major attraction, often held in large arenas like the Circus Maximus. Imagine fast-moving chariots racing side by side, horses sprinting at full speed, drivers balancing control and risk as they navigate tight turns. The crowd cheers loudly, supporting their favorite teams or factions, creating an atmosphere similar to modern sports fandom. These events were not just entertainment, they were emotional experiences that united people across different backgrounds. Now think about why such large-scale entertainment existed in the first place. Beyond enjoyment, it played a role in maintaining social order. By providing public spectacles, leaders could gain popularity, keep citizens engaged, and reduce unrest. This concept, often described as bread and circuses, reflects how food distribution and entertainment were used to maintain stability within the empire. It's a reminder that even in ancient times, governments understood the importance of keeping people satisfied and occupied. But while crowds enjoyed these spectacles, life outside the arena continued. Workers returned to their routines, merchants continued trading, soldiers maintained security, and administrators managed the empire's affairs. Rome functioned like a constantly moving system, where different parts operated simultaneously to keep everything in balance. And as you observe this rhythm, you start to see patterns: work, rest, entertainment, politics, and survival all interconnected, each element influencing the other in subtle ways. Now imagine yourself standing in the middle of all this activity, hearing the noise, feeling the movement, observing the diversity of people around you. You begin to understand that Roman life was not defined by a single experience, but by a combination of many. Some moments were intense, others were calm, some were predictable, others were uncertain. But together they formed a complete picture of daily existence, and as we continue deeper into this journey, we'll explore even more layers of Roman life, family structure, religion, beliefs, traditions, challenges, and the unseen forces that shaped how people thought, behaved, and lived their lives. Because to truly understand Rome, you don't just look at its buildings or battles, you look at the people, their habits, their struggles, and their stories. And that's exactly where our journey is heading next. Now let's step into something that quietly shaped every Roman's identity in ancient Rome: family, beliefs, and daily traditions. Because beyond the streets, markets, politics, and entertainment, the Roman household was the true center of life, where values were passed down, discipline was taught, and relationships were built. Imagine living in a household where the head of the family, known as the pater familias, holds authority over nearly every aspect of family life. Decisions about finances, marriage, and even the future of children could be influenced by this figure. This structure created a sense of order and hierarchy within the home. Reflecting the broader organization of Roman society itself, children grew up learning respect, responsibility, and the importance of duty from a young age. Family was not just emotional, it was practical, social, and deeply tied to survival. Now picture a typical Roman morning at home. Conversations between family members, preparation for the day's work, and small routines that repeat daily. These moments may seem simple, but they form the foundation of Roman life. Meals shared together, responsibilities assigned, and expectations understood. And within this environment, traditions and customs were passed from one generation to the next. Ensuring continuity in culture and behavior, religion also played a major role in everyday life. Romans believed in a wide range of gods and goddesses, each associated with different aspects of life such as war, agriculture, love, and protection. Household shrines were common, where families would offer small prayers or rituals to honor their household spirits and seek blessings for health, prosperity, and safety. Religion was not separate from daily activities. It was integrated into them. Before major decisions, during important events, or even at the start of a meal, people might acknowledge the gods. This constant connection to belief systems gave people a sense of guidance and meaning in their daily routines. Now think about how this influenced behavior. When people believe that higher powers are observing or guiding them, it often affects their choices, discipline, and outlook on life. This created a mindset where actions were not just personal, but part of a larger spiritual framework. Festivals were another important aspect of Roman religious and social life. Throughout the year, various celebrations were held in honor of different deities, bringing people together in public gatherings filled with food, performances, rituals, and community interaction. These events provided breaks from routine and strengthened social bonds. Now imagine yourself attending one of these festivals. The atmosphere is lively, people are talking, music is playing, and the city feels more connected than usual. For a moment, differences in class and occupation feel less significant, as people participate in shared experiences, and this shared participation helped reinforce unity across the empire. But even within families and traditions, challenges existed. Maintaining harmony in households, balancing responsibilities, and managing resources required effort and cooperation. Misunderstandings, financial pressures, and social expectations could all create tension. Yet families adapted, just like the society around them. Resilience was a key part of Roman life. People learned to adjust to circumstances, support one another, and continue moving forward despite difficulties. And as you observe all these layers family structure, belief systems, traditions, and daily habits, you begin to see how deeply interconnected Roman life truly was. Nothing existed in isolation. Each aspect influenced the other, creating a complex but functioning system. And as we continue further into this journey, we will uncover even more about the challenges Romans faced over time, including economic shifts, political instability, external threats, and the gradual changes that shaped the rise and transformation of the empire. Because understanding daily life is not just about routines. It's about seeing how individuals, families, and communities contributed to something much larger than themselves. Now let's go even deeper into something that quietly determined the stability of life in ancient Rome. The balance between security, military power, and constant external pressure. Because while daily life may seem structured and routine, Rome was never truly at rest. Imagine living in a world where borders are always being defended, where soldiers march across vast territories, and where news of conflicts arrives regularly. The Roman military wasn't just a force, it was the backbone of the empire. Disciplined, organized, and highly trained, it allowed Rome to expand, protect its lands, and maintain control over diverse regions. Now picture yourself as a young man considering military service. Joining the army could mean years of strict training, following commands, building infrastructure like roads and fortifications, and participating in campaigns that could take you far from home. But it also offered something important: stability, identity, and in some cases, social mobility. For many, the military was not just duty but opportunity. And as soldiers moved across regions, they also carried Roman culture, language, and influence with them, helping unify the empire in subtle ways. Meanwhile, back in the cities, citizens lived their lives with an awareness that the empire's strength depended on these forces. Security allowed trade to flourish, cities to grow, and daily routines to continue without constant disruption. But maintaining such a large system required constant effort. Logistics, communication, and coordination were essential. Messages had to travel across long distances. Supplies had to reach armies and cities, and leadership had to remain organized to prevent breakdowns. This is where Roman engineering and administration played a critical role. Roads, bridges, aqueducts, and infrastructure were not just conveniences. They were essential tools that kept the empire functioning. Imagine clean water flowing into cities through aqueducts, supporting public baths, households, and daily needs. This level of engineering allowed urban life to thrive in ways that many other ancient societies struggled to achieve. And while all of this was happening, ordinary people continued their routines, working, trading, raising families, participating in social life. It's important to realize that Roman life wasn't just defined by grand events or famous leaders, it was built on the consistency of everyday actions performed by millions of individuals. Each person contributed to the larger system in their own way, whether through labor, service, trade, or administration. Now take a moment to reflect on how interconnected everything is. The roads you travel on, the systems that support cities, the structure of society, and even the idea of order itself. In Rome, these elements were carefully developed and maintained over time. And while challenges existed, such as economic pressure, political changes, or external threats, the empire continued to adapt. This adaptability is one of the key reasons Rome remained influential for centuries. And as you continue this journey, you begin to see that life in Rome was not static. It evolved, shifted, and responded to internal and external forces. People adjusted their roles, societies changed over time, and new developments reshaped how individuals lived. And through all of this, one thing remained constant: the human experience of striving, working, adapting, and finding meaning within the structure of daily life. And now, as we move further, we are going to explore even more hidden layers of Roman life: the pressures people faced, the opportunities they chased, and the realities that defined both the rise and the endurance of one of history's greatest civilizations. Now let's step into the human side of life in ancient Rome that often gets overlooked: the emotions, ambitions, fears, and daily mental struggles that people experienced while living inside such a massive and complex civilization. Because behind every structure, every law, and every system, there were real people trying to make sense of their lives. Imagine waking up with responsibilities already waiting for you, knowing that your actions today directly affect your family, your income, and your future. This constant awareness created a mindset of pressure, but also purpose. Romans were often driven by the idea of duty to family, duty to work, duty to society, and this sense of responsibility shaped how people approached life. Now think about ambition. Even in a structured society with clear classes, many Romans still dreamed of improving their status. A merchant might aim to expand their business. A soldier might hope for recognition or promotion, and a citizen might seek influence through connections or public service. These ambitions didn't always lead to dramatic success, but they gave people direction and motivation. And in a world without modern distractions, people often focus deeply on their goals, relationships, and daily progress. But alongside ambition came uncertainty. Life in Rome was not always predictable. Economic changes, political shifts, health issues, or unexpected events could impact a person's stability. Illness, for example, was a real challenge. Medical knowledge existed, but it was limited compared to modern standards. People relied on a combination of practical treatments, traditional remedies, and beliefs. Access to care varied depending on social class, with wealthier individuals having better access to trained practitioners. Now imagine dealing with illness while still needing to fulfill responsibilities. This creates a situation where resilience becomes essential. People had to continue functioning even when conditions were not ideal, and this resilience became a defining trait of Roman life. Another important aspect was relationships. Friendships, family bonds, and social connections played a major role in daily happiness and survival. People relied on each other for support, collaboration, and trust. Whether it was business partnerships, family cooperation, or community interaction, relationships helped individuals navigate the challenges of life. Even casual conversations in public spaces could lead to opportunities, information, or alliances. Communication was a powerful tool, and those who could express themselves clearly often had an advantage. And as you observe this, you start to realize something deeper. Roman life was not just about external systems. It was also about internal strength, mindset, discipline, adaptability, and social awareness all contributed to how individuals experienced their lives. Two people living in the same city could have completely different experiences depending on their class, choices, and circumstances, yet both would share the same environment, the same streets, and the same cultural framework. This contrast is what makes studying Roman life so fascinating. It shows how structure and individuality coexist. And as we continue exploring further, we move toward understanding how all these elements, work, politics, family, religion, military, economy, and personal mindset combined to create a civilization that lasted for centuries. Because Rome was not built on a single idea or force, it was built on the collective lives, efforts, and experiences of millions of people working together, adapting to challenges, and shaping a system that would leave a lasting impact on history. And now, as we go deeper, we will begin to explore how all these factors eventually connected to the bigger picture of Rome's growth, stability, and transformation over time. Now let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture of life in ancient Rome. Because everything you've experienced so far, from daily routines to social classes, from work to entertainment, all connects to one powerful idea. Rome was a system constantly balancing growth, control, and adaptation. Imagine living in a civilization that is always expanding its influence, bringing new regions, cultures, and people under its structure. With expansion comes opportunity, but also complexity. More people means more resources to manage, more communication to maintain, and more coordination required to keep everything functioning smoothly. This is where Roman organization becomes truly impressive. The empire developed systems for administration, taxation, law, and governance that allowed it to manage vast territories. Provinces were governed by officials who reported back to central authority, ensuring that order was maintained across different regions. This structure helped Rome remain stable despite its size. Now think about how this affected everyday citizens. Laws influenced behavior. Trade regulations affected merchants, and taxes contributed to public services and military funding. Even if people were not directly involved in politics, they were still part of the system. And this connection between individual lives and larger governance is what kept the empire functioning as a unified whole. But as Rome grew, challenges also increased. Managing diversity across cultures required flexibility. Different regions had their own traditions, languages, and customs, yet they were integrated into the Roman system. This meant that Rome had to balance uniform control with local adaptation. In many cases, allowing certain levels of local autonomy helped maintain stability while still preserving central authority. Now imagine the mindset required to live in such an environment. People had to be aware, not only of their immediate surroundings, but also of the broader system they were part of. Decisions made by leaders could affect supply chains, military movements, and even daily life in cities. This created a sense of interconnectedness where everything was linked. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see how advanced Roman civilization truly was for its time. It wasn't just about buildings or battles. It was about systems, organization, and long-term sustainability. Engineering projects like roads and aqueducts weren't isolated achievements. They were part of a larger vision to support population growth, trade, and urban life. These innovations allowed Rome to function at a scale that few ancient civilizations could achieve. And while the empire faced internal and external pressures over time, its ability to adapt played a major role in its endurance. Leadership changes, economic shifts, and external threats all influenced the direction of the empire, but the underlying structure remained resilient for centuries. Now bring your focus back to the individual. A single person living in Rome may not have understood the full complexity of the empire, but they experienced its effects every day through work, food, housing, social interaction, and opportunity. Their life was shaped by both personal choices and larger systems beyond their control. And this dual influence individual effort combined with societal structure is what defines the Roman experience. As we continue forward, we'll begin connecting all these elements into a complete understanding of how daily life, systems, and human behavior work together to create one of the most influential civilizations in history. And with each layer we uncover, the picture becomes clearer, not just of Rome itself, but of how large societies function and evolve over time. Now let's explore something that quietly controlled almost every aspect of life in ancient Rome time: routine and discipline. Because unlike modern life where flexibility is common, Roman daily life followed a structured rhythm that revolved around natural light, social expectations, and responsibilities. Imagine your day starting early in the morning with sunrise. People didn't have digital alarms or artificial lighting like today, so their schedule naturally followed the sun. Work would begin early, and by midday, activity would peak in markets, public spaces, and workplaces. As the day progressed, especially toward evening, people would start winding down, returning home, spending time with family, or engaging in social interactions. This natural rhythm created a lifestyle where productivity was closely tied to daylight and efficiency mattered. Now think about how this affects behavior. When your time is limited by natural conditions, you become more aware of how you spend each hour. Romans developed a sense of structure in their routines, balancing work, rest, meals, and social life within the available time. And even though they didn't have modern timekeeping devices like smartphones or digital clocks, they still managed to organize society effectively using tools like sundials and water clocks. This shows how adaptable human systems can be, even with limited technology. Now imagine yourself trying to manage your day in this environment. You wake up early, complete your tasks, interact with others, and adjust your activities based on the time of day. There's a sense of urgency, but also flow. Nothing feels rushed in the modern sense, but everything is purposeful. And within this routine, small moments become meaningful. A conversation in the marketplace, a meal shared with others, a brief rest during the heat of the day. These moments create the texture of daily life. Now let's talk about something deeply connected to daily living: communication. In Rome, communication wasn't instant like today. Messages traveled through messengers, letters, and word of mouth. This meant that information spread gradually and sometimes unpredictably. Rumors, news, and official announcements could take time to reach different parts of the city or empire. Because of this, public spaces played a key role in information sharing. People gathered to exchange ideas, discuss events, and stay updated on what was happening around them. This created a culture where conversation was powerful. What you said, how you said it, and who you knew could influence opportunities and relationships. Now think about how this compares to modern life. Today, information is instant, but in Rome, information had value because it was slower and more personal. People relied on trust, observation, and social networks to stay informed, and this reliance on human interaction strengthened community bonds. Now, as you continue to visualize Roman life, you start noticing how interconnected everything truly is. Time, communication, work, relationships, and social structure all influence each other. A change in one area can affect many others. For example, a disruption in trade could impact food supply, which could affect daily routines, which could then influence public mood and stability. This interconnectedness is what made Rome both powerful and complex. It required coordination at every level, and the people living in it, whether they realized it or not, were active participants in maintaining that balance. And as we move further, we are going to bring everything together, tying daily life, systems, human behavior, and long-term stability into one complete understanding of how Rome functioned, not just as an empire, but as a living, breathing society shaped by millions of individual lives working in harmony. Now let's bring everything together and look at the long-term reality of living in ancient Rome. Because beyond daily routines, one of the most important aspects of Roman life was uncertainty over the future and how people prepared for it. Imagine living in a world where your future is not guaranteed by modern systems like insurance, advanced healthcare, or stable global economies. Instead, your future depends heavily on your decisions, your connections, your social class, and sometimes even luck. This created a mindset where people valued preparation, adaptability, and resilience. Romans often planned for the long term, saving resources when possible, building relationships, and maintaining their roles within society. Now think about the concept of legacy. In Roman culture, leaving behind a name, a family lineage, or a reputation was extremely important. People wanted to be remembered, whether through achievements, family success, or contributions to society. This desire influenced behavior, motivation, and ambition. It wasn't just about living day to day, it was about what you leave behind, and this idea can be seen across different classes. Wealthy individuals might invest in public works or political careers to secure their legacy, while common citizens focused on providing stability and opportunity for their families. Now let's reflect on something subtle but powerful: adaptation. Throughout Roman life, whether dealing with work, social structure, or external pressures, adaptation was key. People who could adjust to changes, learn new skills, and respond to challenges were more likely to succeed. This applied not only to individuals, but also to the empire itself. Rome expanded, evolved, and adjusted its systems over time to maintain control and stability. And this ability to adapt is one of the reasons it remained influential for so long. Now imagine yourself as part of this system. Every action you take, working, learning, interacting, contributing, is part of a larger network. Your life is not isolated. It is connected to others around you. And in a society like Rome, these connections form the foundation of how everything functions. Trade depends on workers, cities depend on infrastructure, governance depends on communication, and society depends on cooperation. When you step back and look at it all, Roman life becomes a web of interactions where each thread supports the others. And as you journey through this experience, from waking up in a crowded apartment to walking through markets, attending events, observing politics, understanding family life, religion, work, military, and social structure, you begin to see a complete picture forming, not just of a civilization, but of human life within a structured system. And that's what makes studying Rome so powerful. It's not just history. It's a reflection of how societies are built, how people live within them, and how individual lives contribute to something much larger. So as this journey continues in your mind, take a moment to ask yourself, if you were truly living in this world with its challenges, routines, opportunities, and limitations, how would you adapt? What role would you take? And how would your daily life shape the legacy you leave behind? Because in the end, Rome wasn't just made by emperors or armies. It was made by everyday people living their lives, making choices and moving forward one day at a time. Now let's continue deeper, moving into the subtle realities that often go unnoticed when studying ancient Rome: the emotional weight, the psychological side of daily life, and how people mentally navigated a world that demanded both discipline and endurance. Imagine living in a society where expectations are constantly present, from family responsibilities to work obligations to social roles. There is always something that requires your attention. This creates a mindset where people become highly aware of their position in life, their actions, and their reputation. Reputation in Rome wasn't just a social detail. It was a form of currency. How others perceived you could influence opportunities, trust, and long-term relationships. Now think about how this affects behavior. People naturally try to maintain consistency in how they present themselves. Honesty, reliability, and competence become valuable traits because they build trust over time. And in a world without modern verification systems, trust is built through repeated interaction and observation. This makes relationships extremely important. Whether in business, family, or social settings, maintaining good connections could open doors that might otherwise remain closed. Now let's imagine a simple scenario. You are interacting with someone in a marketplace. The conversation is not just about buying or selling. It's about reading the person, understanding their intentions, and building a level of mutual confidence. These small interactions, repeated daily, form the foundation of economic and social life. And over time, individuals develop strong communication skills, awareness of others, and the ability to adapt their approach depending on the situation. This is a skill that many Romans naturally developed through necessity. Now consider the role of routine in shaping mindset. When your life follows a consistent pattern: wake up, work, interact, rest, you begin to develop discipline. Actions become habits, and habits define outcomes. Romans lived in a way where repetition was part of daily existence, and this repetition helped create stability in both personal life and society, even though challenges existed. The structure of daily routines provided a sense of predictability, and within that predictability, people found ways to grow, improve, and maintain balance. Now zoom out again and think about the empire as a whole. Millions of individuals, each following their own routines, yet all contributing to a larger functioning system. This is where the scale of Rome becomes truly remarkable. It wasn't controlled by a single action or event. It was sustained by countless small actions happening simultaneously across different regions: workers producing goods, merchants trading, soldiers maintaining security, administrators managing systems, families raising the next generation. Each role played a part in maintaining continuity, and when you understand this, you realize that Roman life wasn't just about survival. It was about participation, being part of something larger than oneself, contributing to a system that, despite its imperfections, managed to function across vast distances and diverse populations. And as we continue forward, we will begin to tie these human experiences into the broader historical perspective, looking at how such a system influenced future civilizations, shaped modern concepts of governance, infrastructure, and society, and left a legacy that continues to impact the world even today. Because the story of Rome is not just about the past. It's about the foundations of how organized human societies operate, adapt, and evolve over time. Now, let's take the final step in this journey through ancient Rome by connecting the everyday experiences of its people to the lasting legacy it left behind. Because what you've been exploring isn't just a snapshot of the past, it's the foundation of many systems that still influence the modern world today. Imagine living in a civilization where roads connect distant regions, legal systems define order, architectural techniques push engineering limits, and administrative structures manage large populations. These innovations were not isolated. They worked together to support a functioning society. Roman roads, for example, didn't just allow movement. They enabled trade, communication, military expansion, and cultural exchange. Aqueducts didn't just carry water, they supported public health, urban growth, and daily living, and legal frameworks didn't just regulate behavior, they created a sense of structure, fairness, and governance that could be applied across regions. Now think about how these systems impacted ordinary people. A merchant could transport goods more efficiently, a citizen could rely on public infrastructure, a soldier could move across territories with coordination, and a family could live within a structured environment. All of these experiences were made possible because of long-term planning and organization at a large scale. But beyond systems and infrastructure, Rome's greatest legacy lies in the way it demonstrated how human societies can organize themselves. It showed that with coordination, communication, and shared structure, it is possible to manage complexity across vast populations. And even though the empire itself eventually transformed over time, its influence did not disappear. Elements of Roman law, engineering, language, and governance continued to shape future civilizations and modern institutions. Now bring your attention back to the individual again. Every Roman, whether wealthy or poor, powerful or ordinary, contributed to this larger story. Their daily routines, decisions, struggles, and efforts all combined to create the rhythm of life that sustained the empire. And when you look at it this way, history becomes more than just events, it becomes a collection of lived experiences. Real people waking up each day, facing challenges, making choices, and moving forward. And perhaps the most powerful realization is this: even though thousands of years separate us from their world, the core aspects of human life remain surprisingly similar. The need to work, to connect, to grow, to find purpose, and to adapt. These experiences transcend time. And by understanding Roman life in detail, you are not only learning about history, you are also gaining insight into how human societies function, how individuals navigate systems, and how everyday actions contribute to something much larger. And as this journey reaches its conclusion, take a final moment to reflect. If your life were part of a civilization like Rome, what would your daily routine look like? How would you interact with others? What challenges would you face? And what kind of legacy would you aim to leave behind? Because in the end, life in Rome was not just about emperors, battles, or monuments. It was about people. And it was their collective lives that built, sustained, and defined one of the most remarkable civilizations in history. We'll continue a bit further and deepen the immersion, focusing on perspective and reflection as if you are truly inside the world of ancient Rome. Because at this stage, it's not just about facts anymore. It's about understanding what it feels like to live in such a system day after day. Imagine that this world is your normal. The sounds of the streets, the structure of society, the expectations placed upon you, all of it becomes your reality. Not something you observe, but something you live within. And when something is your normal, you don't question it every day. You adapt to it, move through it, and make decisions within its boundaries. Now think about how humans naturally adjust over time. No matter the environment, people tend to find patterns, routines, and ways to cope. In Rome, this meant learning how to navigate social hierarchies, understanding who to trust, recognizing opportunities, and managing limitations. These are not just historical behaviors. They are human behaviors that appear in many forms across time. Now imagine yourself walking through the same streets repeatedly. You begin to recognize faces, locations, routines. Familiarity starts to build. This familiarity creates comfort, even in a complex environment. And over time, your perception of the world becomes shaped by repetition and experience. Now consider how knowledge is passed on. In Rome, Much of what people learned came from direct experience, observation, and interaction rather than formalized systems like we have today. Younger generations learned by watching elders. Apprentices learned from masters. And citizens learned by participating in society. This hands-on learning approach created practical understanding rather than purely theoretical knowledge. And because of this, skills were often developed through repetition and real-world application. Now step back one final time and observe the bigger pattern. A civilization made up of individuals, each adapting to their environment, each contributing through their roles, each influenced by the structure around them. This creates a cycle society shapes individuals, and individuals collectively shape society, and in Rome, this cycle continued for centuries, allowing the empire to function, evolve, and leave behind a lasting imprint on human history. And as you reach this point in the journey, you are not just looking at ancient Rome as a distant civilization. You are understanding it as a living system of human experience. One where daily life, structure, ambition, challenges, and adaptation all came together to form something far greater than any single person. And now, as this deep exploration comes to a close, take with you not just the knowledge of how Romans lived, but the understanding of how humans, across time, build systems, create meaning, and navigate the world around them. Because in many ways, the story of Rome is also a story about us, how we live, how we adapt, and how we continue to build societies that reflect both our limitations and our potential. At this point, let's gently wrap the journey while keeping the same immersive tone in ancient Rome, because after experiencing life from multiple angles, daily routines, social structure, work, entertainment, beliefs, and long-term systems, it becomes clear that Rome was not defined by one single factor, but by the continuous interaction of all these elements working together. Imagine one final time that you are standing in the middle of a Roman city. The movement around you hasn't stopped. The conversations continue. The routines carry on. And life flows just as it always has. People are waking up, working, trading, socializing, learning, and resting. Each person focused on their own responsibilities, yet unknowingly contributing to the larger rhythm of the empire. And in that moment, you begin to understand something important. Civilizations are not built overnight. They are built through repetition, cooperation, structure, and human effort over long periods of time. Rome, in particular, demonstrates how organization and adaptability can sustain a society across generations, even with its challenges, pressures, and changes. It maintained a level of continuity that influenced future systems long after its peak. Now bring your attention back to yourself as the observer of this journey. What may have started as curiosity about ancient Rome has now become an understanding of how people lived, fought, worked, and interacted within a structured world, and that understanding goes beyond history. It becomes a way to see patterns in human behavior, society, and development. Because when you study a civilization like Rome in depth, you begin to recognize that many aspects of life ambition, routine, relationships, challenges, and growth are universal across time. The environment may change, the technology may evolve, but the core human experience remains deeply connected. And as this long journey concludes, you're left with more than just information. You're left with perspective. A perspective that allows you to appreciate not only the past, but also the present world you live in. And perhaps now, when you look at your own daily life, you might notice small similarities. The routines you follow, the roles you play, the connections you build, and the way your actions contribute to something larger than yourself. Because in the end, whether in ancient Rome or today, life is shaped by how we adapt, how we interact, and how we move forward within the systems we are part of. And that is the timeless story that connects all of us. Now let's add one final layer to bring this entire journey to a powerful, memorable close in ancient Rome, because every long story deserves not just an ending, but a reflection that stays with you long after the video ends. Imagine the same Roman streets you've been walking through in your mind, but now viewed with deeper awareness. The people you once saw as just background figures now represent real lives, each with their own struggles, goals, and daily experiences. The worker who wakes up early, the merchant negotiating in the market, the soldier preparing for duty, the family sharing a simple meal, the child learning from an elder. All of them are part of a continuous cycle of life that repeats, evolves, and sustains the civilization. And now, when you observe them again, You don't just see actions, you see meaning, because every routine, every conversation, every effort contributes to something larger than the individual. And that realization is what connects the past to the present in a powerful way. Now shift your focus back to yourself once more. In your own life, you also follow routines, make decisions, build relationships, and work toward goals. Just like in Rome, your daily actions may seem small on their own, but together they form the direction of your life over time. This is where the lesson of Rome becomes timeless. It shows that consistency, discipline, and adaptation are not just ancient concepts. They are universal principles that continue to shape human lives today. And as you carry this understanding forward, you may begin to see your own environment differently, not just as a place you exist in, but as a system you actively participate in, where your choices matter, your habits matter, and your growth matters. And finally, as this journey reaches its true conclusion, take a moment to appreciate how far you've come through this experience. From imagining the streets of Rome, to understanding its people, its systems, its challenges, and its structure, you've not just learned history, you've experienced it in a way that connects knowledge with perspective. And that perspective is something you can carry into anything you watch, learn, or explore next. Because whether it's ancient Rome or the modern world, the deeper truth remains the same. Life is shaped by people, powered by systems, and defined by the choices we make every day within them. And with that, this journey through ancient Rome comes to a close. But the understanding you've gained continues beyond it. Now, as we go deeper into understanding ancient Rome, another important layer to consider is how information and communication spread across the empire. Because in a world without modern technology, messages had to travel through physical means such as messengers, written records, and official announcements. And this made the speed and reliability of communication a critical part of how Rome functioned, especially when managing distant provinces, military movements, and administrative decisions. And despite these limitations, Rome developed highly organized systems that allowed information to flow across vast distances, which helped maintain coordination and control over its territories. And when you imagine this in practice, you can picture officials sending reports, commanders relaying orders, and citizens receiving updates through public postings or gatherings, all of which contributed to a shared awareness of events within the empire. In this sense of connectedness, even without instant communication, played a key role in maintaining unity across diverse regions. And at the same time, this communication structure also reflects how important trust and hierarchy were within Roman society, because messages often passed through layers of authority before reaching the final recipient, ensuring order, but also depending heavily on the integrity of those in between. And as you continue to visualize daily life, you begin to notice how every system in Rome was interconnected, from trade routes that transported goods across long distances, to roads that enabled movement of people and armies, to administrative frameworks that organized governance, each component supporting the others in a network that sustained the empire as a whole. And when these elements worked together smoothly, they created stability and efficiency. But when any part was disrupted, it could affect the balance of the entire system, showing how interconnected and interdependent Roman life truly was. And now, as you reflect on everything you've explored so far, from daily routines to social roles, from public spaces to communication systems, from individual behaviors to large-scale organization, you start to see ancient Rome not as a distant or isolated civilization, but as a complex and evolving structure shaped by human effort, cooperation, and adaptation over time. And this understanding allows you to appreciate not just what Rome was, but how it functioned at its core and why it remained influential for so long. Because beneath the surface of its history lies a consistent pattern of structure, interaction, and continuity that defines not only Rome but many societies throughout history, and even in the modern world, where systems still rely on coordination, roles, communication, and shared purpose to function effectively. And by recognizing these patterns, you gain a broader perspective that extends beyond a single civilization, helping you see connections between past and present in a more meaningful way. And as this journey continues to unfold, each layer you explore adds more clarity to the bigger picture of how human societies develop, operate, and sustain themselves over time. Continuing in the same uninterrupted flow, we now turn our attention to how economy and daily survival shape the lived experience of people within ancient Rome. Because beyond structures, politics, and communication, The foundation of any civilization ultimately depends on how people sustain their lives day to day. And in Rome, economic activity was deeply integrated into everyday routines, where markets were not just places of trade, but centers of interaction, negotiation, and exchange, where value was constantly being defined through supply, demand, and human need. And as you imagine walking through a Roman marketplace, you can see stalls filled with goods arriving from nearby farms and distant provinces, each item representing not just a product, but a chain of effort involving farmers, transporters, merchants, and organizers, all contributing to a system that kept the city supplied. And this flow of goods highlights how interconnected regions were within the empire, because resources from one area supported populations in another, creating a network of dependency that strengthened unity while also requiring careful coordination. And within this environment, individuals learn to adapt their roles based on opportunity, skill, and social position, which meant that economic life was not static but dynamic, constantly responding to changes in availability, demand, and external conditions. And when you look at this closely, you begin to understand that survival in Rome was not just about individual effort, but about participation in a larger system where each role, no matter how small it seemed, contributed to the functioning of the whole. And this perspective helps reveal how deeply integrated daily life was with the broader structure of society. Because even simple actions like buying food, producing goods, or offering services were part of a continuous cycle that sustained both individuals and the civilization itself. And as this cycle repeated day after day, it reinforced stability, built familiarity, and created patterns that allowed Rome to operate at scale over long periods of time, demonstrating once again that the strength of a civilization lies not only in its leadership or achievements, but in the consistency and cooperation of the people who live within it. And as you continue to observe these patterns, you can start to see how economic activity, social roles, and system-wide organization all merge into a single interconnected experience that defines life within the empire. We now explore another crucial dimension of life within ancient Rome: the role of time, structure, and long-term discipline in shaping both individuals and the civilization as a whole. Because beyond daily survival and social interaction, Rome was sustained by systems that required consistency over long periods, and this consistency was not accidental, but developed through habits, expectations, and cultural norms that guided how people behaved in their roles. And when you imagine this in practice, you can see how repetition played a central role in Roman life, where routines were not just personal preferences, but essential components of maintaining order in a complex society. And whether it was a soldier following strict training schedules, a merchant maintaining regular trade practices, or an official carrying out administrative duties, each person contributed to a predictable rhythm that allowed systems to function smoothly. And this predictability created a sense of stability that supported both individual lives and the broader structure of the empire. And when you step back and observe this pattern, it becomes clear that Rome's strength was not only in its expansion or achievements, but in its ability to maintain continuity through disciplined behavior and organized processes. And this continuity allowed knowledge, traditions, and practices to be passed down over generations, reinforcing the identity and cohesion of the society, while also enabling adaptation when necessary, because systems that are built on strong foundations of routine and structure are often better equipped to handle change without collapsing. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see how the concept of time in Rome was not just about hours and days, but about cycles of action, repetition, and progress that accumulated into long-term outcomes. And this perspective reveals a deeper understanding of how civilizations endure, showing that it is not just momentary events that define history, but the consistent efforts of individuals working within systems over extended periods, creating a continuous flow that shapes the direction of an entire society. Let's now bring attention to the human experience at a more personal level within ancient Rome. Because beyond systems, structures, and routines, what truly gives life meaning inside any civilization is how individuals perceive their own existence within it. And in Rome, people lived with a strong awareness of their roles, responsibilities, and limitations, which influenced not only their actions but also their mindset, expectations, and aspirations. And when you imagine being a person living in that time, your perspective of the world would be shaped by your environment, your social class, your occupation, and your access to resources. all of which would determine the opportunities available to you and the path your life might follow. And within these boundaries, people still found ways to express themselves, build relationships, pursue goals, and create meaning in their daily lives, which shows that even within structured systems, human individuality continues to exist and adapt. And this balance between structure and personal agency is one of the most defining aspects of Roman society, because while systems provided order, it was the people within those systems who gave them life, movement, and continuity. And as you think about this interaction, you can begin to see how identity in Rome was not just individual, but also collective, shaped by belonging to a larger group, whether through family, profession, citizenship, or region. And these connections influenced how people viewed themselves and others, reinforcing both unity and distinction within the society. And over time, these shared experiences contributed to a cultural framework that helped maintain cohesion across diverse populations, allowing different groups to function within the same overarching system. And as you continue to reflect on this, you realize that the human element is what ultimately sustains any civilization. Because while structures may organize life, it is human behavior, interaction, and adaptation that determine how those structures evolve and endure. And this understanding adds yet another layer to your journey through Rome, showing that behind every system, every routine, and every institution, there are individuals whose everyday lives collectively shape the course of history. Now shifting deeper into the lived reality of ancient Rome, one of the most fascinating aspects to understand is how people balanced work, rest, and social life within the same daily framework. Because unlike modern lifestyles where work and personal life are often separated by strict boundaries, Roman life tended to blend these elements together in a more fluid way, where social interaction often occurred alongside economic activity and public spaces served multiple purposes at once, allowing people to conduct business, meet acquaintances, exchange news, and build relationships within the same environment. And as you imagine moving through this world, you can see how conversations would naturally develop during transactions, how friendships could form through repeated encounters in the same places, and how social networks were maintained through consistent interaction over time, creating a sense of familiarity and connection among individuals who regularly shared the same spaces. And beyond the marketplace and public forums, leisure also played an important role in Roman life, with people engaging in various forms of entertainment, relaxation, and communal activities that provided a break from routine responsibilities, helping to maintain a balance between productivity and rest. And these moments of leisure were not just about enjoyment, but also about reinforcing social bonds. As people gathered together, shared experiences, and participated in events that brought communities closer. And when you observe this balance carefully, you begin to understand that Roman society was not purely driven by work or obligation, but by a combination of effort, interaction, and recovery that allowed individuals to sustain their energy and continue contributing to the system over time. And this balance between activity and rest reflects a broader principle that can be seen across many aspects of human life, where long-term stability often depends on the ability to manage energy, maintain connections, and adapt to the demands of daily living. And as this perspective develops further, it becomes clear that life in Rome was not just structured by external systems, but also shaped by internal rhythms that guided how people experienced their day, interacted with others, and maintained their place within the larger society. Now expanding further into another essential layer of life within ancient Rome, it becomes important to understand how education, knowledge, and skill development played a role in shaping individuals and maintaining the continuity of the society. Because although access to formal education varied depending on social class and circumstances, the transfer of knowledge was still a vital part of Roman life, occurring through families, mentorship, apprenticeships, and structured learning for those who had the opportunity. And in many cases, children would learn practical skills from parents or guardians, gradually preparing them for roles they would take on as adults, while others who pursued more formal education would study subjects such as reading, writing, rhetoric, and philosophy, which were considered valuable for public life, communication, and leadership. And as you imagine this process, you can see how learning was not just about acquiring information, but about developing the ability to think, speak, and act effectively within society. And this emphasis on communication and reasoning helped individuals participate more confidently in social, political, and economic environments, allowing them to express ideas, negotiate situations, and navigate the complexities of daily interactions and beyond individual development. The presence of shared knowledge and cultural understanding contributed to a sense of unity across different regions of the empire because common practices, language elements, and social norms created a foundation that people could rely on when interacting with one another, even across distances. And this shared framework made it easier for systems to function cohesively, as individuals operated with a similar understanding of expectations and behaviors. And when you step back and look at the bigger picture, education in Rome can be seen not only as a personal advantage, but also as a supporting element of the entire civilization, helping to maintain order, improve communication, and strengthen the overall structure by preparing individuals to fulfill their roles more effectively within the system. And this connection between learning and societal function further demonstrates how deeply interconnected individual growth and civilization-wide stability truly are. Now moving into another deeply important dimension within ancient Rome, it is essential to understand how beliefs, traditions, and cultural values influence the mindset and daily behavior of the people. Because beyond physical systems and social structures, the way individuals interpreted the world around them played a significant role in shaping their actions, decisions, and sense of purpose. And in Roman society, religion and tradition were closely intertwined with everyday life, where rituals, ceremonies, and practices were often observed not only as spiritual expressions, but also as social and cultural expectations that reinforced unity and continuity. And when you imagine this environment, you can see how public and private moments alike could include elements of belief, whether through offerings, celebrations, or observances that connected individuals to something larger than themselves. And these shared practices helped create a sense of identity that extended beyond the individual, linking people together through common customs and experiences. And at the same time, traditions were passed down through generations, preserving knowledge, values, and behaviors that contributed to stability within the society, allowing people to rely on familiar patterns even as the empire continued to grow and evolve. And this continuity of tradition played an important role in maintaining cohesion, because when people share a common set of beliefs and cultural references, it becomes easier to communicate, cooperate, and function within the same system. And as you reflect on this aspect, you begin to see that Roman life was not only structured by external organization, but also guided by internal meaning, where beliefs and traditions helped individuals interpret their place in the world and their connection to others, adding another layer to the already complex and interconnected nature of the civilization. And this combination of structure, culture, and shared understanding further explains how Rome was able to sustain itself over long periods, as both systems and beliefs worked together to support the overall functioning of society. Now, continuing deeper into the interconnected nature of life within ancient Rome, another key element to understand is how transportation, infrastructure, and connectivity played a crucial role in holding the empire together. Because without efficient movement of people, goods, and information, even the most advanced systems would struggle to function across vast distances. And Rome addressed this challenge through the development of extensive road networks, bridges, and logistical systems that allowed armies, merchants, officials, and travelers to move with greater efficiency and reliability. And when you imagine these roads in use, you can see a continuous flow of activity where soldiers march towards strategic locations, traders transport goods between regions, and messengers carry important information that needs to reach distant areas, all contributing to the coordination of the empire as a whole. And these pathways were not just physical routes, but also symbols of connection, linking cities, provinces, and communities into a unified network that enabled interaction and exchange. And this level of connectivity helped reduce isolation between regions, allowing different parts of the empire to function together despite geographical separation. And as a result, Rome was able to maintain influence over a wide area by ensuring that movement and communication remained as consistent and dependable as possible. And when you observe this system closely, you begin to realize that infrastructure is not just about construction, but about enabling relationships between places and people, because without connection, systems remain fragmented. But with strong connectivity, they become integrated and interdependent. And this principle can be seen clearly in Rome's ability to sustain large-scale organization over time, where roads and routes acted as the backbone of coordination, supporting everything from trade and governance to military operations and cultural exchange. And as you reflect on this, it becomes evident that the success of Rome was not dependent on a single factor, but on the alignment of multiple systems working together in harmony, each reinforcing the other to create a stable and functioning whole. Now moving even deeper into the social fabric of life within ancient Rome, it becomes important to understand how hierarchy and social stratification influenced everyday interactions, opportunities, and perceptions, because Roman society was organized into different classes and groups, each with its own roles, privileges, and limitations. And this structure affected not only what people could do, but also how they were viewed and how they viewed others. And when you imagine this environment, you can see how identity was often shaped by one's position within the social system, where factors such as citizenship, wealth, occupation, and family background played a role in determining access to resources, influence, and participation in public life. And within this framework, individuals navigated their circumstances by adapting to the expectations and constraints associated with their social standing, while still seeking ways to improve their situation through work, relationships, or skill development. In this dynamic created a society where mobility existed in certain forms, but was still influenced by structural boundaries that defined the overall organization of the population. And as you observe these layers, you begin to understand that social hierarchy in Rome was not just about division, but also about function, because each group contributed in different ways to the operation of the society, whether through labor, governance, trade, or service, and together these contributions formed a system in which each role supported the others, maintaining balance across the civilization. And at the same time, interactions between different social groups created a complex network of relationships where cooperation, negotiation, and sometimes tension all played a part in shaping daily life. And this interaction between structure and human behavior further demonstrates how Roman society operated as an interconnected system, where individual actions and social organization continuously influenced one another, contributing to the stability, growth, and long-term functioning of the empire as a whole. Now extending further into the practical realities of survival and governance within ancient Rome, it is essential to understand how law, order, and regulation form the backbone of stability across the empire, because in any large and complex society, maintaining consistency in behavior and resolving conflicts requires structured rules that guide interactions between individuals, groups, and institutions. And in Rome, laws were developed, recorded, and applied in ways that help define acceptable conduct, protect rights within certain limits, and establish procedures for handling disputes. And when you imagine this system in action, you can see how daily life would be influenced by expectations of fairness, accountability, and authority, where agreements between individuals could be recognized, violations could be addressed, and decisions could be made through established channels rather than arbitrary actions. And this presence of legal structure contributed to a sense of order that allowed people to operate within predictable boundaries, which in turn supported trade, communication, and social interaction. Because when rules are known and consistently applied, individuals can make decisions with greater confidence. And beyond maintaining order, laws also reflected the values and priorities of the society, shaping how relationships were managed, how responsibilities were defined, and how power was distributed among different roles within the system. And as you reflect on this, it becomes clear that law in Rome was not just a set of restrictions, but a framework that enabled the civilization to function at scale, providing a shared reference point that guided behavior and supported coordination across diverse populations. And when combined with infrastructure, social structure, economy, and culture, the legal system became one of the key elements that held the empire together, reinforcing stability while allowing the complex machinery of Roman life to continue operating across time and distance. Now, bringing attention to the final deeper layer of understanding within ancient Rome, it becomes clear that one of the most defining characteristics of the civilization was not any single achievement, but the ability to sustain itself through the continuous interaction of many interconnected systems. And when you look at Rome as a whole, you can see how daily life, social structure, economy, infrastructure, communication, beliefs, education, law, and human behavior all work together in a coordinated way, forming a complex network where each part supported the others. And this interconnectedness meant that changes in one area could influence multiple aspects of the system, requiring adaptability and resilience to maintain balance over time. And as you imagine observing Rome from above, you would not just see individual activities happening separately, but a synchronized flow of movement, interaction, an organization that reflects both order and complexity. And within this flow, individuals continued to live their lives, making decisions, forming relationships, and contributing to the larger structure without necessarily seeing the full picture of how everything was connected. Yet their combined actions created the reality of the civilization itself. And this highlights an important concept that extends beyond Rome, showing that large systems are often the result of many smaller actions aligned over time, rather than a single moment or decision. And when you reflect on this idea, you begin to recognize how patterns of cooperation, repetition, adaptation, and structure are not unique to one place or era, but are fundamental to how human societies operate in general. And this understanding allows you to see Rome not just as a historical subject, but as a model for examining how complex systems function, evolve, and sustain themselves, providing insight into both the past and the present through the lens of interconnected human activity. Now, as we move toward the final layers of insight within ancient Rome, it becomes meaningful to reflect on how change itself played a role in shaping the civilization over time. Because no society remains exactly the same forever, and Rome, despite its long period of stability, continuously experienced gradual transformations influenced by internal developments, external pressures, leadership changes, economic shifts, and cultural evolution. And when you imagine this process unfolding across generations, you can see how small adjustments in policies, practices, and social dynamics could accumulate over time, eventually leading to noticeable differences in how the society functioned. And this gradual nature of change meant that Rome was not defined by sudden shifts alone, but by the steady progression of adaptations that allowed it to respond to new challenges while maintaining continuity in its core systems. And this balance between stability and change is a key reason why Rome remained influential for so long, because it was able to preserve essential structures while still evolving enough to remain functional in changing conditions. And as you observe this carefully, you begin to understand that resilience in any system comes from the ability to adapt without losing identity, to adjust without collapsing, and to evolve while maintaining coherence across its parts. And within Rome, this resilience was reflected in how institutions, traditions, and practices persisted, even as they were modified to meet new demands, creating a dynamic yet stable environment where continuity and transformation existed side by side. And this perspective adds another layer to your overall understanding, showing that civilizations are not static entities, but living systems that grow, respond, and reorganize over time through the combined influence of countless small changes. Now bringing everything together within ancient Rome, it becomes possible to see the civilization not as a collection of separate elements, but as a continuously operating system where every component, people, structures, routines, beliefs, communication, economy, law, and infrastructure worked in alignment to sustain daily life. And when viewed from this integrated perspective, Rome appears less like a distant historical empire and more like a functioning ecosystem of human activity, where each part depended on the others to maintain balance, and individuals, whether aware of it or not, contributed to the overall stability through their everyday actions, decisions, and interactions. And this interconnectedness created a self-reinforcing cycle in which order-enabled activity, activity-supported systems, systems-shaped behavior, and behavior maintained order, forming a loop that persisted over long periods of time. And as you reflect on this, you begin to recognize that the true essence of Rome lies not only in its monuments or achievements, but in the continuous coordination of its people and systems working together across generations. And this realization extends beyond history, offering a broader understanding of how complex societies function in general, where long-term stability is achieved not through isolated success, but through consistent alignment between individuals and the structures they operate within. And by observing Rome through this lens, you gain a clearer perspective on how civilizations develop, adapt, and sustain themselves through time, revealing patterns that remain relevant even in the modern world, where similar principles of cooperation, organization, and interaction continue to shape how societies grow and evolve. Now, as we arrive at the final concluding reflection within ancient Rome, it's important to bring together the deeper understanding you built throughout this journey and recognize the broader meaning behind everything you've observed. Because what makes Rome truly remarkable is not just its scale, its architecture, or its historical legacy, but the way it represents a complete system of human organization where countless individuals, each with their own roles, contributed to a shared structure that functioned across time. And when you look at it this way, Rome becomes more than just a civilization. It becomes an example of how human life, when organized through cooperation, structure, and adaptation, can create something that endures beyond generations. And as you recall the different aspects you've explored, daily routines, social hierarchy, communication networks, economic activity, education, traditions, infrastructure, law, and the gradual process of change, you can see how each layer was not independent, but deeply connected to the others, forming a web of interactions that sustained the empire as a whole. And within that web, individuals lived their lives, often focused on their immediate responsibilities, yet collectively contributing to a much larger outcome that extended far beyond any single person's awareness. And this realization highlights a universal truth about civilizations, that their strength lies not in isolated elements, but in the harmony between those elements working together over time. And as you step back from this perspective, you may begin to notice similar patterns in the modern world around you, where systems, roles, and interactions continue to shape how societies operate, reminding you that while the context may change, the underlying principles of human organization remain consistent. And through this understanding, ancient Rome transforms from a historical subject into a lens through which you can better interpret structure, behavior, and connection in both the past and the present. Now, bringing the journey to its final closing reflection within ancient Rome, it's time to step back one last time and view everything not as separate scenes, but as one continuous experience of a living, breathing system of human life. Because throughout this exploration, you have moved through different layers of Roman existence, observing how people lived their daily routines, how they interacted socially, how they worked, learned, believed, traded, communicated, and adapted to the structures around them. And when all of these elements are seen together, they form a complete picture of how a civilization operates from the inside, not just in terms of power or expansion, but in terms of human connection and coordination across time. And what becomes most clear at this stage is that Rome's enduring nature was not the result of a single factor, but the combined effect of many small, consistent actions repeated over long periods, where individuals performed their roles, systems supported those roles, and both evolved together in response to changing conditions, creating a cycle of continuity and adaptation that allowed the empire to function at scale. And as you reflect on this final perspective, you begin to understand that studying Rome is ultimately about understanding patterns, patterns of organization, patterns of growth, and patterns of interaction that are not limited to one civilization, but are shared across human societies in general. And by recognizing these patterns, you gain the ability to see beyond surface-level history and into the underlying mechanisms that shape how communities form, develop, and sustain themselves. And this awareness allows you to interpret not only ancient Rome, but also the modern world around you with greater clarity, because the same foundational principles of cooperation, structure, adaptation, and shared purpose continue to influence how people live and interact today, making this journey not just a look into the past, but a deeper understanding of the ongoing story of human civilization itself. Now, as the final thought settles within ancient Rome, the journey you've taken can be understood as more than just an exploration of a historical civilization. It becomes a perspective shift, where the focus moves from isolated facts to a connected understanding of how human systems operate over time. And when you look back at everything covered, you can see how each layer, daily life, social roles, communication, economy, education, belief systems, infrastructure, law, and gradual change was not separate, but interwoven into a single functioning whole, where each component influenced and supported the others. And together, they formed the foundation that allowed Rome to exist, grow, and persist across generations. And within that structure, individuals lived their lives with their own goals, challenges, and experiences. Yet their actions collectively contributed to something far larger than themselves, demonstrating how civilizations are shaped not by a single moment or decision, but by continuous participation over time. And this realization naturally extends beyond Rome, offering insight into how any complex system, past or present, depends on alignment, consistency, and interaction between its parts. And as you internalize this understanding, you begin to recognize similar patterns in the world around you, where routines, roles, relationships, and systems all work together in ways that may not always be visible at first glance, but are essential to how societies function and evolve. And through this lens, ancient Rome becomes more than history. It becomes a framework for observing and understanding human life itself, revealing how structure and behavior combine to create stability, how adaptation allows continuity, and how the collective actions of individuals shape the direction of entire civilizations over time. Now, as the final closing layer of this journey within ancient Rome, it's worth ending on a quiet but powerful realization that ties everything together into one last unified perspective. Because after exploring the many dimensions of Roman life, its systems, its people, its routines, its structure, and its evolution, you can now see that what truly defined Rome was not a single achievement or a single era, but the ongoing continuity of human effort expressed through organized living over time. And in that sense, Rome becomes a reflection of how societies are built not in moments, but in processes, where each day adds another layer, each action contributes another step, and each generation carries forward the structure built by the previous one, sometimes preserving it, sometimes adjusting it, but always adding to the ongoing flow of civilization. And when you observe this carefully, you begin to understand that the story of Rome is not frozen in the past. It is a living example of how complexity emerges from repetition, how stability emerges from cooperation, and how long-term systems are maintained through countless small contributions that, on their own, may seem insignificant, but together form something far greater. And as this perspective settles in, it becomes clear that ancient Rome is not just something to study, but something to learn from, because it reveals patterns that continue to exist wherever humans organize, interact, and build together, reminding us that at the core of every civilization, past or present, is the same fundamental principle: people working within systems, shaping those systems, and being shaped by them in return, creating an endless cycle that defines the progress and continuity of human society across time. Now, bringing this extended journey within ancient Rome to one final, deeply reflective layer, it becomes clear that what you have experienced is not just a description of a civilization, but a gradual unfolding of understanding about how human life organizes itself into meaningful patterns over time. And as you step back and look at the full picture, you can see that Rome's true legacy lies not only in its historical impact, but in the way it demonstrates the power of interconnected systems, where every individual action, every routine, every institution, and every interaction contributes to a larger structure that evolves continuously through generations. And within that structure, stability is not something that appears instantly, but something that is built through repetition, maintained through cooperation, and strengthened through adaptation, allowing the civilization to function as a cohesive whole despite its size and complexity. And as you reflect on the journey you've taken, you may begin to realize that the value of studying something like Rome is not just in remembering events or facts, but in developing the ability to see how systems operate beneath the surface of everyday life, how roles are distributed, how connections are formed, and how long-term outcomes emerge from countless small decisions made over time. And this awareness gives you a broader lens through which to interpret not only history, but also the present world you live in, where similar principles continue to apply in modern societies, reminding you that while technologies, environments, and circumstances may change, the underlying patterns of human organization remain consistent. And in that continuity lies a deeper understanding of both the past and the present, unified through the shared experience of people living, interacting, and building together across time. Now arriving at the very final closing reflection within ancient Rome, the journey ultimately leads to a simple but powerful realization. Everything you've observed is part of one continuous human story, where civilization is not defined by a single moment, but by the ongoing interaction of people, systems, and time. And as you bring together all the layers you've explored: daily life, social structure, communication, economy, education, beliefs, infrastructure, law, hierarchy, and gradual change, you can now see how each of these elements functioned not in isolation, but as interconnected parts of a larger whole, where every action contributed to maintaining balance, and every system depended on the others to operate effectively. And within this environment, individuals live their lives guided by routines, shaped by roles, influenced by culture, and connected through shared spaces and interactions, creating a network of human activity that sustained the civilization across generations. And what makes this understanding meaningful is not just the historical detail itself, but the perspective it provides. That complex societies are built through consistency, maintained through cooperation, and evolved through adaptation over time. And when you apply this perspective beyond Rome, you begin to notice similar patterns in the modern world, where systems still rely on coordination, individuals still operate within roles, and long-term outcomes still emerge from repeated actions accumulated over time. And in this way, ancient Rome becomes more than a subject of study. It becomes a lens through which you can better understand how human life organizes itself, how stability is achieved, and how progress is shaped through the continuous alignment of people and systems working together across time. Now continuing deeper into the same continuous flow within ancient Rome, another important perspective to consider is how uncertainty and risk we reap part of everyday life. Because unlike modern systems with advanced technology and rapid information access, people in Rome had to make decisions with limited information, relying on experience, observation, trust, and established practices to guide their actions. And this meant that adaptability was not just a useful trait, but a necessary one, as individuals had to respond to changes in weather, resource availability, political conditions, and social dynamics, all of which could influence daily routines and long-term stability. And when you imagine living in such an environment, you begin to understand how resilience was developed not through comfort, but through consistent exposure to variation and challenge, where people learn to adjust their behavior based on circumstances, building an intuitive understanding of how to navigate their world effectively. And this adaptability extended beyond individuals to the systems themselves, as structures within Rome evolved over time to handle new demands, expanding administrative methods, improving logistics, and refining processes to maintain coordination across different regions. And this ongoing cycle of adjustment reflects a broader principle that stability is not the absence of change, but the ability to manage it in a way that preserves overall function. And as you reflect on this, you can see how both individuals and systems in Rome were engaged in a continuous process of responding, learning, and adapting, creating a dynamic balance that allowed the civilization to operate across shifting conditions. And this perspective adds yet another layer to your understanding, showing that the endurance of Rome was not simply due to its strength, but due to its capacity to evolve while maintaining coherence, a quality that emerges only when both structure and flexibility exist together in harmony. Now moving even further into this continuous perspective within ancient Rome, it becomes valuable to reflect on how memory, legacy, and long-term influence shape the way civilizations are understood today. Because Rome did not simply exist in isolation during its time, it also left behind systems, ideas, architecture, language influences, and organizational principles that continued to affect future societies long after its peak. And when you consider this, you can see how the impact of a civilization extends beyond its physical lifespan, living on through the knowledge it produced, the structures it inspired, and the patterns it established. And this continuation of influence highlights how civilizations are part of a larger historical chain, where each era builds upon the foundations of the past, either preserving, modifying, or reinterpreting what came before. And in this sense, Rome serves as a bridge between ancient and modern forms of organization, offering insights into governance, infrastructure, law, and societal coordination that can still be observed in various forms today. And as you think about this legacy, you begin to realize that studying Rome is not only about understanding how people lived at that time, but also about recognizing how their systems and ideas contributed to shaping the development of later societies, creating a ripple effect across history that connects generations through shared principles and evolving practices. And this awareness reinforces the idea that the influence of a civilization is not confined to its own timeline, but continues forward through time, carried by the structures, concepts, and knowledge that persist and adapt long after the original society has changed or transformed. Now, as we continue within ancient Rome, another deeper aspect worth understanding is how identity and belonging were experienced not only at an individual level, but also through collective participation in shared systems. Because in Rome, people often define themselves through multiple overlapping roles, such as family member, citizen, worker, trader, or participant in a local community, and each of these roles contributed to how they interacted with others and how they perceived their place within the broader structure of society. And when you imagine this layered identity, you can see how individuals were not limited to a single dimension of existence, but instead navigated a combination of responsibilities, relationships, and expectations that shaped their daily experiences. And this sense of belonging to both smaller groups and the larger civilization created a balance between individuality and collective identity, where personal actions still mattered, but were always connected to a wider social context, and this connection helped reinforce cooperation, as people operated within shared frameworks that guided behavior, communication, and interaction, allowing the society to function with a degree of coordination despite its complexity. And as you observe this closely, it becomes clear that identity in Rome was not just about who someone was as an isolated person, but about how they fit into a network of relationships and systems that define their role within the civilization. And this interplay between individual and collective existence adds yet another dimension to your understanding, showing that human life within Rome was deeply interconnected, where personal experience and societal structure continuously influenced one another in shaping the overall functioning of the empire. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another final layer to understand is how long-term stability was influenced by continuity across generations. Because civilizations are not maintained by a single group of people at one moment in time, but by the gradual transfer of knowledge, practices, responsibilities, and structures from one generation to the next. And in Rome, this continuity was reflected in how traditions were preserved, how skills were passed down, how roles were inherited or learned, and how systems remained functional even as individual participants changed over time. And when you imagine this generational flow, you can see how each group of people built upon what was already established, maintaining essential elements while also introducing adjustments when needed, allowing the civilization to remain consistent while still evolving. And this process created a sense of ongoing progression, where the present was always connected to both the past and the future, forming a continuous chain of human activity that sustained the empire across centuries. And as you reflect on this idea, it becomes clear that continuity is one of the most important factors in the endurance of any complex system. Because without it, structures would lose coherence, knowledge would be fragmented, and coordination would become difficult to maintain. But with it, civilizations can preserve their identity while adapting to change, ensuring that the core functions remain intact even as conditions shift. And this balance between preservation and evolution is a key reason why Rome was able to leave such a lasting impact on history, demonstrating how the connection between generations plays a crucial role in shaping not only the survival of a society, but also its long-term development and influence over time. Now moving into an even more reflective layer within ancient Rome, it becomes important to understand how perception itself shapes the way a civilization is experienced and remembered. Because what we know about Rome today is not just the result of events that happened in the past, but also the way those events were recorded, interpreted, preserved, and passed down over time. And this means that our understanding is built upon layers of observation, documentation, and analysis that have been influenced by different perspectives across history. And when you think about this, you begin to realize that a civilization is not only defined by how it functioned internally, but also by how it is viewed externally by those who study it later. And this adds another dimension to the concept of legacy, where meaning is shaped not only by original actions, but also by interpretation across time. And in the case of Rome, its continued presence in education, literature, architecture, and discussions shows how deeply it has been integrated into the way we understand governance, organization, and society. And as you reflect on this, you can see that the study of Rome becomes an ongoing process rather than a fixed conclusion. Because each new perspective, each new analysis, and each new generation of learners adds another layer to its understanding, keeping it relevant even in the present day. And this evolving perception highlights how knowledge itself is dynamic, influenced by context, experience, and the passage of time, reminding us that civilizations are not only lived and experienced in their own era, but also continually re-examined and reinterpreted long after they have changed, creating a bridge between history and modern understanding that keeps their influence alive across generations. Now, continuing further within ancient Rome, it's important to recognize how scale itself influenced the complexity of life. Because as a civilization expands in size, both geographically and in population, the challenges of maintaining coordination, communication, and consistency increase significantly. And Rome's ability to manage such scale required the integration of multiple systems working together in alignment, including administrative structures, infrastructure networks, legal frameworks, economic exchange, and social organization, all of which had to function in a way that allowed different regions to operate under a shared structure while still accommodating local variations. And when you imagine this at a large scale, you can see how information had to travel across distances, resources had to be allocated efficiently, and decisions had to be implemented in ways that maintained overall stability. And this level of coordination highlights the importance of organization and hierarchy, where responsibilities were distributed across different levels to ensure that the system could function without becoming overwhelmed. And as you reflect on this, you begin to understand that managing complexity is not simply about control, but about creating frameworks that allow many parts to operate together in a coordinated manner. And Rome's success in doing so demonstrates how structured systems can support large populations over extended periods of time, provided that communication, roles, and processes are sufficiently aligned. And this insight further reinforces the idea that civilizations are built not just on power or resources, but on the ability to organize, connect, and sustain multiple moving parts in a cohesive way across both space and time. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another important dimension to consider is how human motivation and ambition influence both individual behavior and the broader direction of society. Because within any structured civilization, people are driven by a combination of personal goals, social expectations, opportunities, and limitations. And in Rome, these motivations could take many forms, such as the desire for stability, advancement, recognition, security, or contribution to family and community. And when you imagine this at the individual level, each person makes decisions based on their circumstances and aspirations, whether that involves working to improve their livelihood, building relationships, learning new skills, or fulfilling responsibilities within their assigned roles. And when these individual motivations are viewed collectively, they begin to shape patterns of activity that influence the functioning of the entire society, as the combined efforts of many individuals create economic movement, social interaction, and organizational continuity. And this interaction between personal ambition and system structure highlights how civilizations are not only maintained by rules and frameworks, but also by the energy and intentions of the people within them. And as you reflect on this, you can see how Rome's complexity was not just mechanical, but deeply human, driven by the choices, efforts, and aspirations of countless individuals over time, all contributing in different ways to the ongoing life of the civilization. And this perspective further reinforces the idea that at the core of any society lies a balance between structure and human motivation, where systems provide direction and individuals provide action, and together they create the dynamic that allows the civilization to function, evolve, and sustain itself across generations. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, it becomes meaningful to bring the focus toward the idea of interconnected outcomes, where the long-term effects of countless small actions accumulate into larger historical patterns. Because when you observe a civilization over centuries, you begin to see that its development is not the result of isolated events alone, but the combined influence of decisions, behaviors, and adaptations made repeatedly over time. And in Rome, this accumulation can be seen in how systems were maintained, how traditions were preserved, how infrastructure expanded, and how social and economic interactions continue to evolve in response to internal needs and external pressures. And when you imagine this gradual buildup, each generation inherits not only the physical structures and knowledge left behind by the previous one, but also the consequences of earlier choices, which then shape the conditions under which the next set of decisions are made, creating a continuous chain of cause and effect that extends across time. And as you reflect on this, you begin to understand that the story of Rome is not just about events that happened, but about processes that unfolded over long periods, where stability, change, growth, and adaptation were all part of an ongoing cycle. And this cycle demonstrates how civilizations are formed through the interaction of many small components working together in a consistent manner, rather than through sudden or isolated transformations. And by recognizing this, you gain a clear perspective on how complexity develops naturally when individual actions align within structured systems over time, producing outcomes that are far greater than any single contribution on its own. And this principle helps tie together all the layers you have explored so far, showing that Rome's existence was ultimately the result of continuous, interconnected activity sustained across generations within a shared framework of organization and human effort. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, you can extend this understanding further by considering how resilience and adaptation played a crucial role in sustaining such a long-lasting society. Because no civilization remains unchanged over time, and Rome was no exception, as it continuously adjusted to new challenges, shifting conditions, and evolving internal and external dynamics. And within that process, systems were refined, roles were redefined, and structures were reorganized in ways that allowed the society to function under different circumstances. And when you imagine this adaptability in action, it becomes clear that survival and continuity were not dependent on perfection, but on the ability to respond, adjust, and reorganize when needed, whether in governance, economy, infrastructure, or social organization. And this adaptability also reflects a deeper principle that applies to all complex societies, where flexibility within structure becomes a key factor in maintaining balance over time. And as you observe this pattern, you begin to see that Rome's endurance was not just a product of strength, but also of its capacity to evolve while preserving enough consistency to remain stable. And this combination of continuity and change allowed it to influence future civilizations long after its original form had transformed, leaving behind systems, ideas, and frameworks that continue to shape how societies organize themselves. And through this lens, Rome becomes more than a historical subject. It becomes an example of how human systems develop, persist, and transform through ongoing interaction between structure, people, and time, creating a legacy that extends far beyond its physical existence and continues to echo in modern ways of living, organizing, and understanding the world. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, it is also important to recognize how communication and shared understanding acted as invisible forces that held a society together. Because beyond physical structures and formal systems, the way people exchange information, followed norms, passed down knowledge, and interpreted their roles contributed significantly to how smoothly daily life operated. And in Rome, this could be seen through education, public gatherings, administrative coordination, marketplaces, and social interactions, all of which helped align individuals with the expectations and functioning of the wider community. And when you imagine these interactions happening continuously across a large population, it becomes clear that a shared sense of order and awareness was essential for maintaining cohesion, as people relied on both formal instructions and informal cultural understanding to navigate their environment. And over time, these patterns of communication reinforce stability by creating consistency in behavior and expectation, allowing different parts of society to operate in sync, even without constant direct control. And this reveals how civilizations depend not only on visible institutions, but also on intangible elements like shared knowledge, trust, and cultural alignment, which together enable coordination on a large scale. And as you reflect on this aspect, you begin to see that Rome's functioning was supported as much by how people understood and responded to one another as by any physical or administrative system, highlighting the importance of collective awareness in sustaining complex human environments over long periods of time, where each interaction, no matter how small, contributes to the larger web of order that keeps the society active and interconnected. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another important aspect to reflect on is how environment and geography influence the development and functioning of the society. Because the physical setting in which people live often shapes the opportunities available to them, the challenges they face, and the ways they organize their daily lives. And in Rome's case, its location provided access to resources, trade routes, and strategic advantages that supported growth and interaction. And when you imagine how people utilize their surroundings, you can see how natural features like land, water, and climate played a role in agriculture, transportation, settlement patterns, and economic activity. And over time, these environmental factors interacted with human decision-making to guide expansion, infrastructure development, and urban planning, creating a relationship where society adapts to its surroundings while also modifying the environment to better suit its needs. And this ongoing interaction between people and place demonstrates how civilizations are not isolated from nature, but are deeply connected to it, relying on environmental conditions while also shaping them through construction, organization, and resource management. And as you consider this dynamic, it becomes clear that Rome's growth and sustainability were supported not only by its internal systems and human effort, but also by how effectively it engaged with its physical environment, turning natural advantages into structured development and long-term stability, which further reinforces the idea that the functioning of any civilization depends on a balance between human activity and the world in which that activity takes place, forming a continuous exchange that influences both the society and its surroundings over time. Now continuing within ancient Rome, it is also valuable to consider how identity and belonging influence the cohesion of society, because beyond systems, structures, and daily routines, people are also guided by a sense of who they are and where they feel connected. And in Rome, this sense of identity could be shaped by family, occupation, social class, citizenship, and shared cultural practices, all of which contributed to how individuals perceive themselves and their place within the larger whole. And when people identify with a community, they are more likely to participate in its activities, follow its norms, and contribute to its stability, creating a network of relationships that reinforces social unity. And when you imagine this on a broader scale, millions of individuals, each with their own roles and identities, are simultaneously aligned within a common framework that allows them to coexist and function together, even while pursuing different paths and responsibilities. And this alignment is not always perfect, but it is maintained through shared understanding, mutual expectations, and ongoing interaction, which help preserve a sense of order within diversity. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that a civilization is not only defined by its institutions or achievements, but also by the collective sense of belonging that connects its people, allowing them to operate as part of something larger than themselves, where individual identity and collective structure exist side by side, supporting one another in the continuous flow of social life. And this relationship between self and society becomes another essential layer in understanding how Rome functioned as a complex and enduring civilization over time. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another perspective to explore is how change itself operates quietly within a stable system. Because even in a society that appears structured and consistent, transformation is always happening beneath the surface, gradually shaping institutions, behaviors, and expectations over time. And in Rome, this could be seen in the way practices evolved, roles shifted, technologies improved, and social dynamics adjusted in response to internal developments and external influences. And when you imagine these subtle changes accumulating day by day, year by year, they may not appear significant in isolation, but together they create meaningful transitions that redefine how the society functions across generations. And this highlights an important pattern where continuity and change coexist, rather than oppose each other, with continuity providing stability and change enabling growth and adaptation. And within this balance, Rome was able to maintain its structure while still progressing through different phases of development, demonstrating that long-lasting systems are not static, but dynamic in nature, capable of evolving while preserving their core foundations. And as you reflect on this, it becomes clear that the true strength of a civilization lies not in resisting change, but in integrating it in a way that supports long-term stability, allowing the system to remain functional even as circumstances shift. And this continuous interaction between preservation and transformation becomes another key element in understanding how Rome sustained itself across time, while adapting to the realities of each era it passed through. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to understand is how coordination across different parts of society made large-scale organization possible. Because when a civilization grows, it requires the ability to manage activities across many regions, roles, and responsibilities. And in Rome, this coordination involved administrative systems, communication channels, shared rules, and established procedures that helped align actions between individuals and groups, allowing different sectors of society to operate in a connected manner. And when you imagine this coordination in practice, it becomes a network of interdependent activities where each part contributes to the functioning of the whole, such as production supporting trade, trade supporting supply, supply supporting daily life, and daily life sustaining the workforce that keeps the system active. And this interconnectedness means that no single component operates in isolation, but instead relies on the performance of others, creating a balance where consistency in one area supports stability in another. And over time, this level of coordination allows a society to scale beyond small communities into larger, more complex structures, while still maintaining order and functionality. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that Rome's ability to organize and align its many moving parts was a key factor in its endurance, demonstrating how interconnected systems, when managed effectively, can support continuous operation across vast spaces and long periods, forming a cohesive whole from many individual elements working in relation to each other within a shared framework. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another important dimension to consider is how limits and constraints shape the behavior and development of the society, because no system operates without boundaries. And in Rome, limitations such as available resources, physical capacity, administrative reach, and social expectations influenced how decisions were made and how systems were structured. And when you imagine a society functioning within these constraints, it becomes clear that progress is often guided not only by opportunity, but also by the need to work within what is possible, leading to solutions that balance ambition with practicality. And this dynamic encourages efficiency, prioritization, and adaptation. As individuals and institutions find ways to optimize their actions within given conditions, and over time, these constraints can actually contribute to stability by preventing uncontrolled expansion and encouraging more organized development, where systems are designed to operate effectively within manageable limits. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that limitations are not simply obstacles, but also shaping forces that influence structure, decision-making, and growth, helping define the boundaries within which a civilization functions. And in Rome's case, navigating these constraints played a role in how it maintained order, organized its resources, and sustained its systems across time, showing that the presence of limits is an integral part of how complex societies evolve and maintain balance between expansion and control within their overall framework. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to explore is how legacy is formed not only through major events, but through the accumulation of countless ordinary moments that, over time, define the character of a civilization. Because while history often highlights leaders, structures, and milestones, the reality of a society is built equally by everyday actions repeated across generations. And in Rome, this included the consistent efforts of workers, families, traders, learners, and administrators who each contributed in their own way to the ongoing function of society. And when you imagine these daily contributions happening continuously, they create a foundation upon which larger systems depend, making the ordinary just as essential as the extraordinary. And, over time, this accumulation of routine activity becomes the fabric of civilization itself, shaping its identity, stability, and direction. And as these patterns persist across generations, they form traditions, expectations, and cultural memory that carry forward even as individuals come and go, creating a sense of continuity that links the past to the present. And when you reflect on this, you begin to understand that a civilization's legacy is not built in a single moment, but through the steady repetition of human effort, where each small action adds to a larger whole. And together, these actions form a lasting imprint that defines how the society is remembered and how its influence continues beyond its own time, demonstrating that the true essence of Rome lies in the combined weight of everyday life, sustained consistently across centuries within its structured and evolving system. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another perspective to understand is how balance between order and flexibility allowed the society to remain functional. Because in any large system, too much rigidity can limit adaptation, while too much flexibility can create instability. And Rome managed this balance by maintaining established structures while still allowing room for adjustment when necessary. And when you imagine this in practice, it means that certain principles, roles, and processes remain consistent to preserve order, while at the same time, changes could be introduced to respond to new conditions, ensuring that the system did not become outdated or unable to cope with evolving realities. And this interplay between stability and adjustment created a dynamic environment where continuity was preserved without completely resisting transformation. And as a result, the society could maintain its identity while still progressing through different phases of development. And when you observe this balance over time, it becomes clear that it is one of the key factors that supports long-term sustainability. Because systems that endure are those that can hold their core together while still adapting their outer form to meet new demands. And in Rome's case, this balance influenced how institutions operated, how people interacted, and how challenges were managed, demonstrating that endurance is not achieved by remaining unchanged, but by maintaining enough structure to stay coherent while allowing enough flexibility to remain responsive, creating a stable yet evolving system that continues to function across changing circumstances. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another dimension to reflect on is how knowledge was preserved and transmitted across generations. Because for a civilization to maintain continuity over long periods, it must find ways to retain what it has learned and pass it forward in usable forms. And in Rome, this occurred through a combination of written records, education, oral traditions, practical experience, and institutional memory, all of which helped ensure that information did not disappear with time but instead remained accessible to those who needed it. And when you imagine this process in action, knowledge becomes something that is built upon rather than restarted, allowing each generation to begin with the foundations established by the previous one, which reduces the need to rediscover solutions and enables more efficient progress within established systems. And this accumulation of knowledge contributes to stability, as people can rely on tested methods, shared understanding, and established practices when making decisions or performing tasks. And over time, this continuity of knowledge helps maintain coherence within society, ensuring that even as individuals change, the underlying understanding that supports the system remains consistent. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that the preservation of knowledge is a key element in sustaining any complex civilization, because it connects past experience with present action and future development, forming a continuous thread that supports learning, adaptation, and coordination across generations within the broader framework of the society. Now continuing within ancient Rome, this ongoing cycle of facing challenges and responding to them also reveals how learning itself was embedded into the functioning of the society, because each situation, whether successful or difficult, contributed to a growing understanding of what worked, what needed improvement, and how systems could be adjusted to perform more effectively under changing conditions. And when you imagine this accumulation of experience over time, it becomes a form of collective learning where insights are not limited to individuals but are shared, applied, and refined across the broader society, allowing patterns of effective action to emerge and be repeated. And in this way, Rome's continued operation can be seen as the result of both structured systems and accumulated experience working together, where knowledge gained through past situations informed present decisions, and present decisions in turn shaped future outcomes, creating a continuous feedback loop between experience and action. And as you observe this dynamic, you begin to see how civilizations develop not only through planning and organization, but also through the gradual refinement that comes from repeated interaction with real-world conditions, where each response contributes to a deeper understanding of how to maintain balance, stability, and functionality within a complex and evolving environment, reinforcing the idea that growth is an ongoing process built upon the interplay between experience, adaptation, and the continuous effort of the people who operate within the system. Now continuing within ancient Rome, this broader view of continuous learning and adaptation also highlights how interconnected responsibilities shape the way society functioned as a whole. Because within a complex system, no role exists in isolation, and each function depends on others to maintain overall balance. Whether it is production supporting distribution, governance supporting organization, or social structure supporting daily interaction. And when you imagine these roles operating simultaneously, you can see how coordination and mutual reliance create a network where progress in one area supports stability in another. And over time, this interdependence encourages cooperation, as individuals and groups recognize that their actions contribute not only to their own outcomes, but also to the functioning of the wider system. And this awareness helps align efforts across different parts of society, allowing large-scale organization to persist without constant central intervention. And as you reflect on this, you begin to understand that the strength of a civilization lies in how well its parts connect and support each other, forming a cohesive whole from many distinct elements, where each contribution, no matter how small, plays a role in maintaining the continuity of the system. And this interconnected structure, sustained through shared activity and coordinated effort, is what allows a society like Rome to operate as an integrated and enduring civilization across time, demonstrating the importance of relationships, alignment, and collaboration within any complex human environment. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to recognize is how perspective shapes understanding. Because when you observe a civilization from different viewpoints, whether as an individual living within it, a participant in its systems, or an external observer studying its patterns, you begin to notice different aspects of the same reality, and each perspective reveals something unique about how the society functions. And when you combine these perspectives, a more complete picture emerges, showing not just how Rome appeared on the surface, but how it operated internally through the interaction of people, systems, and time. And this perspective also applies to how individuals within the society experience their own lives, as their understanding of the world was influenced by their roles, environment, knowledge, and experiences, shaping how they interpreted events and made decisions. And over time, these individual perspectives collectively contributed to the broader social reality, influencing behavior, communication, and interaction across the system. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that a civilization is not experienced in a single uniform way, but rather through many overlapping viewpoints that together create a richer and more complex understanding of how life unfolds within it. And this multiplicity of perspectives adds depth to the study of Rome, showing that its story is not only about events and structures, but also about how those elements are perceived, interpreted, and experienced by the people who lived within them, forming a layered reality where objective systems and subjective experiences coexist and interact continuously within the broader flow of society. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another aspect to consider is how continuity of purpose can exist even as individual participants change over time. Because while people come and go across generations, the underlying systems, roles, and functions of a civilization often remain in place, allowing the society to persist beyond the lifespan of any single individual. And in Rome, this continuity can be observed in how institutions, traditions, and responsibilities were maintained through structured processes that outlasted personal involvement, ensuring that essential functions continued regardless of who occupied specific positions. And when you imagine this over long periods, it becomes clear that the identity of the civilization is not tied to any one person, but to the ongoing operation of its systems and the shared participation of its people. And as individuals take on roles within this framework, they contribute to something that extends beyond themselves, becoming part of a larger sequence of activity that connects past, present, and future. And over time, this creates a sense of enduring purpose within the structure of society, where the system continues to function even as its components are constantly renewed, demonstrating how continuity is preserved through process rather than permanence. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that the long-term existence of Rome was supported by this ongoing replacement of individuals within stable frameworks, allowing the civilization to maintain its functions across generations while adapting to change through the continuous participation of new members within the established system. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another dimension to observe is how scale changes the nature of organization, because as a society grows larger, the complexity of managing people, resources, and activities increases, requiring more structured systems of coordination, delegation, and specialization. And in Rome, this can be understood through the way responsibilities were divided across different roles and levels, allowing tasks to be handled efficiently without overwhelming any single part of the system. And when you imagine this at a large scale, it becomes clear that specialization allows individuals to focus on specific functions while still contributing to the broader operation, creating a system where many specialized parts work together to maintain overall functionality. And this division of labor helps improve efficiency, consistency, and productivity, as each role develops expertise within its domain while remaining connected to other roles through shared processes and objectives. And over time, this structured approach enables the civilization to handle increasing demands, support larger populations, and maintain order across greater distances, demonstrating how organization must evolve alongside growth. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that the ability to scale effectively is not just about expansion, but about designing systems that can accommodate complexity through coordination, specialization, and structured interaction, allowing the society to remain functional and coherent even as it grows in size and scope within its overall framework. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to reflect on is how infrastructure acts as the backbone that supports all other aspects of a civilization. Because without reliable systems for transportation, communication, water supply, public spaces, and urban organization, the daily functioning of society would become fragmented and less efficient. And in Rome, infrastructure played a crucial role in connecting different regions, enabling movement of people, goods, and information, and supporting economic, social, and administrative activity across the broader system. And when you imagine these networks operating continuously, roads, buildings, public facilities, and urban layouts all work together to create an environment where interaction and coordination become more accessible. reducing barriers between different parts of society and allowing activity to flow more smoothly. And over time, the development and maintenance of such infrastructure require planning, resources, and ongoing effort, reflecting the importance of long-term investment in systems that may not provide immediate returns, but are essential for sustained functionality. And as you observe this, you begin to understand that infrastructure is not just a physical component, but a foundational layer that enables all other systems to operate effectively, supporting the movement, organization, and interaction that define daily life. And in Rome's case, this foundation contributed significantly to its ability to maintain cohesion, expand its reach, and sustain the interconnected activities that allowed the civilization to function as a unified and organized whole over extended periods. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another important layer to understand is how continuity of effort across time depends on maintenance, because even the most well-designed systems require ongoing care, attention, and upkeep to remain functional. And in Rome, this meant that infrastructure, institutions, and social systems all needed regular support to continue operating effectively. And when you imagine this process, it becomes clear that building something is only the beginning, while sustaining it requires repeated actions that preserve its condition, address wear and change, and adapt it to new circumstances and over long periods. This continuous maintenance ensures that systems do not degrade or collapse due to neglect, allowing them to remain reliable parts of daily life. And this principle applies broadly across the civilization, where roads, buildings, administrative processes, and social structures all depend on consistent attention to remain effective. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that stability is not a static state, but an active process maintained through ongoing effort, where the continuity of a civilization is supported not just by creation, but by preservation, repair, and refinement. And this ongoing cycle of maintenance and improvement helps explain how Rome was able to sustain its systems across generations, demonstrating that long-term endurance relies on the repeated commitment to keeping structures, processes, and interactions functioning as intended within the larger framework of society. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to recognize is how human relationships form the underlying fabric that connected all systems together. Because beyond structures, rules, and processes, it is the interactions between people that give meaning and functionality to a society. And in Rome, relationships between family members, colleagues, leaders, and communities played a significant role in shaping trust, cooperation, and coordination. And when you imagine daily life unfolding through these connections, you can see that communication, mutual understanding, and social bonds help align individuals towards shared expectations, making it easier for systems to function smoothly. And over time, these relationships contribute to stability by creating networks of support and interaction that sustain both personal and collective activity, allowing individuals to rely on one another while participating in larger structures. And this interdependence reinforces the idea that a civilization is not only built on systems and infrastructure, but also on the quality of human connections that operate within them, where each interaction contributes to a broader sense of cohesion. And as these connections persist across time, they help maintain continuity within the society, ensuring that even as roles and conditions change, the underlying network of relationships continues to support the ongoing flow of life within the civilization, creating a dynamic balance between individual presence and collective functioning that defines how the system operates as a whole. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another dimension to consider is how identity at the collective level is reinforced through shared experiences, symbols, practices, and traditions. Because when people participate in common activities, observe similar customs, and engage with shared cultural elements, they develop a sense of belonging that extends beyond individual differences. And in Rome, this collective identity was shaped through public life, civic participation, cultural norms, and established ways of living that were repeated and recognized across the population. And when you imagine these shared elements operating over time, they create a unifying framework that helps align diverse individuals into a more cohesive society, allowing people from different backgrounds, roles, and perspectives to feel connected through a common structure of meaning. And this shared identity supports cooperation and coordination, as individuals are more likely to act in ways that align with the expectations and values of the broader community. And over generations, these shared experiences become part of the cultural memory of the society, reinforcing continuity even as individual participants change. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that collective identity is not formed in a single moment, but gradually develops through repeated participation in shared life, creating a sense of unity that helps maintain the integrity of the civilization as a whole within its ongoing system of interactions, relationships, and structured activity. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to understand is how observation and awareness of patterns allow both individuals and systems to function more effectively. Because when people begin to recognize recurring behaviors, predictable cycles, and consistent outcomes, they can make more informed decisions, anticipate changes, and adjust their actions accordingly. And in Rome, this kind of awareness would naturally develop through experience, participation, and exposure to daily life within the system, where individuals learn how their environment operates and how different parts of society interact. And when you imagine this process over time, it becomes a form of practical understanding that is continuously refined through interaction with real situations, allowing people to navigate their roles with increasing familiarity and efficiency. And at the collective level, this shared awareness of patterns contributes to smoother coordination, as common expectations reduce uncertainty and help align actions across different parts of society, creating a more predictable and stable environment. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that the ability to recognize and respond to patterns is a key element in sustaining any complex system, because it enables adaptation without disruption, learning without confusion, and coordination without constant instruction, allowing the civilization to operate in a more natural and self-reinforcing way, where understanding develops gradually through lived experience and becomes integrated into the ongoing functioning of the society as a whole. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another perspective to explore is how transitions between stages of life influence both individual roles and the broader structure of society. Because within any civilization, people move through different phases, learning, working, contributing, mentoring, and eventually passing on their experience. And in Rome, these transitions helped maintain continuity, as each stage of life carried responsibilities that supported the functioning of the system. And when you imagine this flow across generations, younger individuals gradually gain knowledge and skills, then take on more active roles, while older individuals contribute through guidance, experience, and established understanding, creating a cycle where knowledge and responsibility are continuously transferred. And this progression ensures that the system does not rely on a single group indefinitely, but instead remains sustained through a natural movement of participation over time. And as each generation steps into roles previously held by others, they inherit both the structure and the accumulated experience of the past, allowing them to continue contributing while adapting to current conditions. And this ongoing cycle of growth, participation, and transition forms an important part of how a civilization maintains itself across long periods, demonstrating that continuity is supported not only by systems and institutions, but also by the natural progression of human life within those systems, where each stage plays a role in preserving, strengthening, and extending the overall functioning of society as it evolves through time. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to recognize is how balance between individual needs and collective requirements shapes the functioning of the society. Because within any organized system, individuals pursue personal goals, comfort, and development, while the broader structure requires cooperation, contribution, and alignment with shared expectations. And in Rome, this balance was maintained through roles, responsibilities, and social frameworks that allowed personal activity to exist alongside collective order. And when you imagine this interaction, each person operates within a space where their actions both serve their own life and contribute to the larger system, creating a relationship where individual effort and societal function are interconnected. And over time, this balance supports stability by ensuring that personal ambitions do not completely override collective needs, while collective structure does not entirely suppress individual activity, allowing both to coexist in a way that sustains ongoing interaction and productivity. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that a civilization functions effectively when it can accommodate individual variation within a shared framework, where diversity of roles, perspectives, and goals contributes to the overall resilience of the system. And this interplay between the personal and the collective becomes another essential component in understanding how Rome operated as a complex, adaptive, and enduring society, where the alignment of individual actions with broader structures enabled continuous functioning across generations within a unified but dynamic environment. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, Another aspect to understand is how small, repeated actions accumulate into large-scale outcomes, because within any complex society, it is not only major decisions that shape the system, but also the continuous repetition of everyday behaviors that, over time, build patterns of stability, productivity, and interaction. And in Rome, countless individuals engaging in routine tasks working, trading, learning, governing, maintaining, communicating each contributed incremental value that, when combined, formed the operational reality of the civilization. And when you imagine these actions repeating day after day across generations, the effects begin to compound, gradually influencing economic activity, social organization, infrastructure use, and cultural continuity, creating a system where consistency becomes a powerful force. And over time, these repeated contributions establish norms, expectations, and structures that guide future behavior, reinforcing the existing framework while allowing gradual evolution. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that large systems are built not only through singular defining moments, but through the steady accumulation of many small efforts aligned over time, where each individual action may seem minor in isolation, but collectively they produce outcomes of significant scale, demonstrating how continuity, repetition, and persistence work together to sustain and shape a civilization like Rome within its ongoing flow of human activity and structured interaction. How structure and routine create a sense of order that allows uncertainty to be managed more effectively, because in a complex environment where many variables are constantly changing, having established patterns of behavior, predictable systems, and organized processes helps reduce chaos and provides a stable foundation for daily activity. And in Rome, routines in work, trade, governance, and social life helped individuals know what to expect and how to act within different situations. And when you imagine this consistency across a large population, it becomes clear that shared routines contribute to synchronization, allowing different parts of society to operate in alignment without requiring constant adjustment. And over time, these routines become embedded into the functioning of the civilization, shaping habits, expectations, and interactions in ways that support continuity and efficiency. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that structure is not just a form of control, but a framework that enables freedom of action within defined boundaries, giving individuals the ability to operate with clarity while contributing to the larger system. And this combination of routine and structure helps maintain balance in the presence of uncertainty, ensuring that the civilization can continue functioning smoothly even as conditions shift, because the underlying patterns provide a consistent reference point that guides behavior and supports coordination across the many interconnected parts of society. Another important perspective is how feedback from outcomes influence future decisions, because within any functioning system, actions produce results. And those results, whether successful or not, provide information that can guide adjustments moving forward. And in Rome, this feedback could come from economic performance, social reactions, administrative efficiency, or practical experiences in daily life, all of which helped individuals and institutions refine their approaches over time. And when you imagine this ongoing loop, decisions are made, outcomes are observed, and lessons are integrated into future actions, creating a continuous cycle of evaluation and improvement that supports adaptability and learning. And across generations, this process contributes to the gradual evolution of systems, as repeated exposure to results helps identify effective methods and highlight areas that require change, allowing the civilization to improve its functioning without needing to restart from the beginning. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that feedback is a crucial component of any complex society because it connects action with understanding, enabling systems to self-correct, adapt, and stabilize through experience. And this ongoing exchange between doing, observing, and adjusting helps maintain coherence within the broader structure of Rome, ensuring that its operations remain responsive to real conditions while continuing to function as an interconnected and evolving whole over time. Another dimension to recognize is how balance between predictability and uncertainty shapes human behavior within a civilization. Because while structured systems provide consistency and order, uncertainty is always present in outcomes, interactions, and changing conditions. And in Rome, individuals and institutions operated within this blend of known patterns and unpredictable elements, where routines offered a reliable foundation, but outcomes still required judgment, flexibility, and awareness. And when you imagine navigating life in such an environment, decisions are often made based on experience, observation, and probability rather than certainty, encouraging individuals to rely on both established practices and adaptive thinking. And over time, this balance helps develop resilience, as people become accustomed to responding to variation while still operating within a stable framework. And at the societal level, this interplay allows the system to maintain order while remaining capable of handling change, since complete predictability would limit growth and complete uncertainty would disrupt stability. So, the coexistence of both elements creates a dynamic environment where structure guides action and uncertainty drives adaptation. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that civilizations function effectively when they can manage this balance, allowing consistent systems to provide support while still enabling responses to new and unforeseen conditions, ensuring that the overall framework remains functional, flexible, and capable of sustaining continuous activity across time within its interconnected structure. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to understand is how roles and specialization contributed to efficiency and clarity within the society. Because as systems grow in complexity, dividing responsibilities into specific roles allows individuals to focus on particular tasks, develop expertise, and perform their functions more effectively. And in Rome, this can be seen in how different people contributed in distinct ways. Whether it's through administration, trade, craftsmanship, education, or daily labor, each role fitting into the larger system like parts of a coordinated structure. And when you imagine these specialized roles operating together, they create a network where each function supports others, reducing overlap and increasing overall productivity, while also making it easier to organize, manage, and maintain the system as a whole. And over time, specialization allows knowledge and skill to deepen within each area, improving the quality and consistency of outcomes. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that specialization is not just about division, but about alignment, where each part of the system is positioned to contribute in a way that complements the others, forming an integrated whole that can handle complexity through coordinated effort. And this structured distribution of roles helps explain how Rome was able to maintain order and functionality across a large population, demonstrating how clarity and responsibility combined with collaboration across different functions supports the sustained operation of a complex civilization over extended periods. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another dimension to explore is how human adaptability at the individual level contributes to the overall resilience of the system. Because within any society, people constantly encounter changes in their environment, responsibilities, relationships, and available resources. And in Rome, individuals would adjust their behaviors, learn new skills, and respond to shifting circumstances in order to maintain stability in their own lives while continuing to fulfill their roles within the broader structure. And when you imagine this adaptability occurring across a large population, it creates a flexible foundation where the system is not dependent on rigid uniformity, but instead benefits from the ability of individuals to respond to variation, solve problems, and adjust their actions based on context. And over time, this collective adaptability allows the civilization to handle disruptions more effectively, as people and institutions can modify their approaches when needed without breaking the overall framework. And this ability to adapt at multiple levels, personal, local, and systemic, ensures that the society remains functional even as conditions evolve, demonstrating that resilience is not achieved solely through structure, but also through the capacity of its participants to adjust, learn, and continue operating within changing environments. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see how adaptability and structure work together to sustain continuity, allowing Rome to persist through varying circumstances while maintaining its core organization and ongoing activity across time. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another important layer to understand is how coordination of time and activity enabled large groups of people to function in a synchronized way. Because within a complex society, aligning when and how activities occur is just as important as defining what those activities are. And in Rome, daily schedules, public events, work patterns, and administrative processes all followed rhythms that helped organize collective behavior. And when you imagine many individuals operating within similar time structures, it becomes easier for interactions to occur efficiently, whether in markets, workplaces, public spaces, or governance systems. And over time, this shared sense of timing creates a form of synchronization across society, allowing different parts of the system to interact without constant negotiation. As expectations about when things happen reduce friction and improve coordination, And this alignment of activity also supports productivity, as people can plan their actions around predictable intervals and sequences, creating continuity in both individual routines and collective operations. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that time is not just a background element, but an organizing principle that helps structure behavior, coordinate interactions, and maintain the flow of daily life, ensuring that the many moving parts of a civilization operate in harmony within a shared temporal framework that connects individual actions into a cohesive and functioning whole. Now, continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to recognize is how communication between different levels of society helped maintain alignment across the system. Because in a large and complex civilization, information needs to travel between individuals, groups, and administrative layers in order for decisions to be understood and actions to be coordinated. And in Rome, this communication could take many forms, including formal instructions, public announcements, interpersonal discussions, and shared practices that conveyed meaning without the need for constant explanation. And when you imagine this flow of information, it acts as a connective thread that links different parts of society together, ensuring that expectations are understood, responsibilities are clear, and actions are aligned with the broader structure. And over time, effective communication reduces confusion, improves coordination, and supports smoother functioning across various domains, as people are able to respond based on shared understanding rather than uncertainty. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that communication is not just about exchanging words or messages, but about maintaining coherence within a system, allowing different components to stay connected, informed, and responsive to one another. And this ongoing exchange of information helps preserve order within complexity, ensuring that the civilization continues to operate as an integrated whole, where knowledge, instructions, and awareness circulate continuously among its participants within the broader framework of daily activity and organized interaction. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another perspective to explore is how stability over long periods depends on consistency and underlying principles. Because while many surface-level aspects of a society may change, such as leadership, population, or external conditions, the core ideas that guide organization, roles, and interactions often remain steady enough to preserve continuity. And in Rome, this can be understood through the persistence of certain structural approaches to governance, social organization, and daily functioning that provided a reliable foundation even as other elements evolved. And when you imagine this continuity in principles, it acts as a stabilizing framework that allows change to occur without disrupting the entire system, since new developments can be integrated into an existing structure that remains recognizable and functional. And over time, this consistency helps maintain coherence across generations, as individuals enter into a system that already has established patterns and expectations, allowing them to adapt without needing to rebuild the foundations from scratch. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that long-term endurance is supported by a combination of steady underlying principles and flexible application, where the core remains intact while the expression of that core can adjust to different circumstances. And this balance ensures that the civilization continues to function as a unified system, even as it experiences gradual transformation, demonstrating how continuity at the level of principles provides the anchor that holds together the evolving layers of society within its ongoing progression through time. Now continuing within ancient Rome, another layer to understand is how interdependence between regions and communities strengthened the overall unity of the system. Because within a large civilization, different areas often specialize in different types of production, resources, or activities. And in Rome, this meant that various regions contributed in distinct ways while relying on one another for goods, services, and support, creating a network of exchange that connected distant parts into a functioning whole. And when you imagine this network in operation, materials, products, and information move across locations, allowing one area's output to meet another area's needs, which fosters cooperation and mutual reliance. And over time, this interconnectedness reduces isolation between regions, encouraging integration and coordination across the broader system. And as these exchanges continue, they build relationships that reinforce stability, as each part of the society becomes linked to others through ongoing interaction and shared dependence. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that a civilization is not just a collection of separate parts, but a web of connections where each component plays a role in supporting others. And this interdependence ensures that the system functions cohesively, as the activity of one area contributes to the well-being and operation of another. forming a continuous cycle of exchange and cooperation that sustains the civilization as a unified and interconnected whole across its various regions and functions. Another important aspect to recognize is how memory, both individual and collective, helps shape continuity, because the ability to remember past experiences, practices, and outcomes allows a society to avoid repeating certain mistakes, preserve effective methods, and build upon established knowledge. And in Rome, this collective memory was maintained through records, traditions, teachings, and repeated practices that carried forward information across generations. And when you imagine this accumulation of remembered experience, it forms a kind of living archive that exists not in a single place, but within the minds of people, the structures of institutions, and the patterns of behavior that are passed along over time. And this shared memory helps guide decisions by providing reference points from the past, enabling individuals and groups to act with awareness of what has worked before and what has not. And over time, this contributes to stability and consistency, as actions are informed by accumulated understanding rather than being entirely new or disconnected from prior experience. And as you reflect on this, you begin to see that memory is not just about recalling information, but about maintaining continuity between past, present, and future, allowing a civilization to evolve while staying connected to its foundations. And this ongoing preservation of knowledge and experience ensures that the system retains its identity and functionality across generations, supported by the collective remembrance and application of what has been learned within its long and continuous flow of activity. Shift the focus toward how large systems begin to experience internal pressures as they expand, because as a civilization grows in size and complexity, maintaining alignment across all regions, institutions, and populations becomes increasingly demanding. And over time, differences in priorities, resources, and local conditions can create variations in how the system functions in different areas, leading to gradual divergence in practices and expectations. And when you imagine this across a vast network, coordination that once felt straightforward can require more effort, as communication takes longer, decisions involve more layers, and local needs begin to influence how central structures are interpreted and applied. And this introduces a dynamic where maintaining unity is not only about structure, but also about managing differences that naturally arise within a growing society. And alongside this, shifts in influence among leaders, institutions, and regions can reshape how authority and responsibility are distributed, affecting how decisions are made and how effectively they are implemented across the system. And when you observe these kinds of internal changes, they do not necessarily occur abruptly, but often develop gradually through adjustments, responses to challenges, and evolving circumstances that accumulate over time. And this reveals that even within a long-standing civilization, stability exists alongside transformation, where internal complexity increases as the system develops, requiring continuous alignment between its many parts. And as you reflect on this perspective, the understanding of Rome expands beyond daily life and structure into the broader dynamics of how large civilizations manage growth, variation, and shifting internal conditions while continuing to function as an interconnected whole. Building on that ongoing evolution within ancient Rome, another layer to consider is how communication itself influenced the efficiency and cohesion of the system. Because as territories expanded and interactions between distant regions became more frequent, the methods used to transmit information, whether through messengers, written records, or administrative channels, played a crucial role in shaping how quickly and accurately decisions could be implemented. And this naturally affected everything from governance to trade and military coordination, while at the same time, the reliability of these communication channels determined how much trust could be placed in centralized authority, since delayed or distorted information could lead to misaligned actions across different parts of the system. And as a result, maintaining consistency required not only strong leadership, but also structured processes that ensured messages were preserved, interpreted correctly, and acted upon in a timely manner. And when you observe this dynamic, it becomes clear that information flow is not just a background function, but a foundational element that supports stability. Because without effective exchange of knowledge and directives, even well-designed systems can become fragmented. And over time, improvements in administrative practices, record-keeping, and organizational hierarchy helped reduce inefficiencies, allowing Rome to better coordinate its vast network, demonstrating that the evolution of communication methods was closely tied to the overall resilience and functionality of the civilization as it continued to adapt to internal complexity and external demands. Another important dimension to understand is how economic activity functioned as a connecting force between different regions, because trade networks, taxation systems, and the movement of goods and resources created interdependence among cities, provinces, and markets. And this interdependence meant that changes in one area, such as variations in production, supply shortages, or shifts in demand could influence conditions elsewhere, requiring adjustments that kept the broader system balanced. And as commerce expanded, infrastructure such as roads, ports, and storage facilities became essential in supporting efficient exchange, reducing delays, and enabling smoother distribution of materials across long distances, while, at the same time, monetary systems and pricing mechanisms helped standardize transactions, making it easier for individuals and institutions to engage in economic activity with a shared understanding of value. And when you examine these elements together, you can see that economic stability depended not only on output, but also on coordination, regulation, and adaptability. Because fluctuations were inevitable, and the ability to respond to them through policies, resource allocation, and logistical planning played a key role in maintaining continuity, illustrating how economic structures within Rome were deeply integrated into the overall functioning of the civilization and contributed to its capacity to operate across a wide and diverse landscape. The social structure also played a crucial role in shaping how the civilization functioned, because society was organized into different classes and groups, each with its own roles, responsibilities, and levels of influence, and these distinctions affected access to resources, participation in governance, and opportunities for advancement, which in turn influenced how individuals interacted within the system. And as relationships formed between these groups, cooperation and tension both emerged depending on circumstances, creating a dynamic social environment where expectations, obligations, and ambitions intersected. And over time, mechanisms such as laws, cultural norms, and institutional frameworks helped regulate these interactions, providing a sense of order while also allowing limited flexibility for change. And when you observe this structure, it becomes evident that social organization was not static but continuously shaped by economic conditions, political developments, and external pressures. And this ongoing interaction between different segments of society contributed to both stability and complexity, as the civilization balanced unity with diversity in its population, demonstrating how internal social arrangements were deeply connected to the broader functioning and endurance of the system as a whole. Shifting into a different angle, the role of military organization stands out as a defining factor in how the system sustained itself. Because beyond warfare, the military functioned as a structured institution that influenced logistics, engineering, discipline, and even settlement patterns, as armies required supply chains, roads, and coordinated movement across regions. And this need for efficiency often led to the development and maintenance of infrastructure that later supported civilian life as well. While training, hierarchy, and standardized procedures within the ranks created a level of consistency that allowed large groups of individuals to operate with coordination across distances. And this organizational discipline extended its impact beyond the battlefield, reinforcing administrative practices and contributing to the broader stability of the state. And when you look at it closely, the military was not just a tool for conflict, but also a system that integrated with economic, political, and geographic elements, shaping how resources were allocated, how territories were managed, and how authority was enforced across expanding regions, illustrating another layer of interconnected function within the civilization's overall framework. Another angle to explore is how geography itself influenced development, because the physical landscape, rivers, coastlines, terrain, and climate shaped where settlements formed, how people moved, and how regions connected with one another. And in Rome's case, access to waterways supported trade and communication, while fertile land enabled agricultural productivity that sustained population growth, and natural barriers in certain areas provided protection while also defining expansion routes, meaning that the environment was not just a backdrop, but an active factor in decision-making and expansion strategies. And as communities adapted to these conditions, they developed solutions that aligned with local realities, whether in farming methods, construction techniques, or transportation choices. And over time, these adaptations became embedded into the way the civilization functioned, showing that interaction with the environment played a continuous role in shaping patterns of settlement, resource use, and regional connectivity, ultimately influencing how the broader system evolved and maintained itself across different areas. Bringing everything together within ancient Rome, the overall picture shows a civilization that functioned as an interconnected system where multiple elements, political organization, economic activity, social structure, communication, military coordination, and geography were all influencing one another simultaneously rather than operating in isolation. And as each of these components evolved, they created feedback loops where changes in one area led to adjustments in others, requiring continuous adaptation to maintain balance. And this constant interaction between stability and change is what allowed the system to persist over long periods, because no single factor alone determined its trajectory, but rather the combined effect of many moving parts working together under varying conditions. And when viewed from this perspective, Rome can be understood not just as a historical empire, but as a complex adaptive system shaped by ongoing responses to internal dynamics and external pressures, where resilience came from the ability to coordinate, adjust, and reorganize across time, ultimately demonstrating how large civilizations sustain themselves through the integration of structure, process, and adaptation into a unified whole. A key takeaway from studying ancient Rome is that long-lasting systems survive not because they avoid problems, but because they develop the ability to respond, adjust, and learn from them over time. Whether it's communication, economy, leadership, or environment, everything works better when there is coordination, feedback, and flexibility. This same idea applies beyond history. Any organization, community, or even an individual's life improves when decisions are made with awareness, evaluated honestly, and adapted when needed. In simple terms, endurance is less about being perfect and more about being responsive, consistent, and willing to evolve with changing conditions. If this deep dive into ancient Rome opened your mind, then you already know history isn't just stories. It's patterns, systems, and lessons still relevant today. What you've seen here is how a civilization grows, adapts, and survives through constant change. And that same principle applies in many aspects of life. If you found value in this, take a moment to like the video, subscribe for more deep and cinematic content, and share it with someone who enjoys learning.